A general instruction before we get started. As Anvesha said, please keep sharing your questions in the chat box whenever you feel like. We might take those questions during the course of the session as per Sir's convenience. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Arnab and welcome back for today's second session, a workshop on the topic, the art of negotiations. Today's workshop is based on the topic negotiation, an everyday activity that we all engage in. We will learn how as communicators, we can strike the perfect balance between empathy, listening, cultural sensitization, and the knowledge of the subject to effectively negotiate through verbal and non-verbal communication. On behalf of Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communication, Corporate Interface team, I would like to formally introduce our guest for today's workshop, Mr. Prantik Mazumdar, Managing Partner at Happy Marketer, a Merkle company, and Managing Director of CRM Group at Dentsu International. With over 15 years of experience in data-driven digital marketing, customer relationship management, and online reputation management, Mr. Mazumdar is truly a stalwart in the field of data-driven digital media strategizing. Sir began his career as an international trade promoter for the Singapore government in 2005. In 2011, he started his own venture named Happy Marketer, a digital marketing agency that eventually emerged as one of the best and most awarded independent digital marketing firms in Asia. In the span of his career, Mr. Majumdar has worked with several prominent brands like Standard Chartered, Starbucks, the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, among several others. In 2015, Sir was recognized as one of the top 50 most influential marketeers in the world. Adding to his diverse portfolio, Mr. Majumdar is also an active columnist, a highly regarded mentor, a speaker, and an investor. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Arnab, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. Very good afternoon, very good evening. As I was sharing earlier, it kind of feels like coming home because I'm originally a Pune boy. So I wish I could have been on campus and kind of spoken to you guys in person. I was sharing that the first time I visited the campus was in 2008, 2009, came to address the MBA batch on a topic around brand strategy. That was just about a year and a half before I started Happy Marketer. So, well, today I'm not going to get into brand management, digital marketing, etc. I think I do a lot of that anyway, but this is a very, very interesting topic, the art of negotiation. And so what I'm going to do is I do have in the next 60 odd minutes, I do have a deck of slides as my anchor, and I'll kind of take you through my perspectives, certain frameworks, certain suggestions, and hopefully I'll try and bring that to life through my professional and personal experience. And well, I'm going to negotiate something to make this fun. I would love you guys, or rather need you guys to interact and participate. So we'll do it in two ways, right? So there's a chat box on the Zoom interface. So feel free to kind of interject, ask me questions, make comments at any point in time. Typically in a classroom, I would love people to interject and stop because there's no point of having a monologue otherwise. And I have set up a Slido, a few polls on Slido. So if you guys can keep a browser open on Slido, you can just type sli.do and the event code will be 24899. So I'm just going to put it on the chat. So sli.do and the event code, if it asks you, it should be 24899, right? So we'll get to that, as and when we kind of come to that. Let me see if I can get my slides. Okay. Is my slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. So, as the topic says, the art of negotiation, right in the very topic, I think it's very clear that this is an art, right? And there, I must admit, there is a science to it. There's a process to it. I'm a general believer that most things in life can be learned, right? Some people may be naturally good at something. There, many of us have our talents in certain different areas of life, but there is research, there is proof, there are proof points, there is a process to kind of learn pretty much everything and anything in life. It really comes down to, our energy, hunger, political will to do so. So if you're not, if you think you're not, good at negotiation, fine. That's your viewpoint, but it's something that you can learn. So one thing that I want to tell you, right? I mean, upfront, and before we kind of get into this dialogue, is uh, I think as we kind of go through these slides, certain things you may agree, certain things you may disagree. That's fine. But I think one thing that I've learned over the last 15, 16 years of my career is that I think it's very important to not have a binary viewpoint of life. Life in general is not black and white. There are gray areas. And what that really means, what that has taught me is no matter what the situation, you can always negotiate. Never take anything as sacrosanct. Even though it may be in your contract, even though your teacher or your parents may say, no, this is the way, this is industry practice, this is best practice, so be it. But I can tell you this, no matter what stage or phase of life you're in, everything is negotiable. Whether it's easy or difficult, that's a different question. But always believe that there is always an option. Yeah. So if you keep that open mind, believe that the world is a bit more than black and white. Let's kind of, take this journey forward. Now, what I've done is I've kind of divided my, presentation into about 10 odd chunks, 10 fundamental, very simple questions. I'm going to speak mostly in English, might use some Hindi here and there, hopefully most of us understand and appreciate, but I want to keep it simple and colloquial because I think sometimes many of these concepts, especially when we learn them in, classrooms and read textbooks, I think they become very academic for good reason. But I think it's important. I think to me, what's always important is if a concept seems difficult, it's all the more important to kind of talk about it in simple language. It's important to kind of break it into small chunks and also make it relatable through personal experiences, right? So first question, right? And we're going to use Slido for this. When I say the word negotiation, what comes to mind? Don't process. What's that image in your head? What's that word that comes to your mind? Let's all take a pause, right? So why don't we go to Slido, right? I am on Slido on my other device. So let me check. That question is, that question is live. So you guys can either enter it, on the Zoom box, or I would prefer it if it's on Slido. It's just easier for me to kind of, wow, loving it. So I can actually, are you guys able to see my screen, or just can someone tell me what can you see right now?
So we can see the PowerPoint slide that says Slido event number 24899, but not the word cloud.
Not the word cloud. Okay, cool. No worries. I'm going to read this out, right? So amazing. I love, right now we have about 78 participants, 78 kind of responses. That's amazing. All right, so let me see, keep going. All right, another minute, and then I'm going to stop this poll. And let me try and, all right, I'm going to actually share so that nothing's hidden. I'm going to actually just share. Hopefully you can see the screen. Let's see if I can present that in a different mode. All right. Hopefully you guys can see the word cloud. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Cool. I like to keep it real. Hopefully you can see some other stuff on my window as well. Hopefully nothing wrong there. So bargain, right? Negotiation. I think it's good to see bargaining, because, negotiation has a nice formal connotation to it, but bargaining, or maybe a slightly more negative connotation word, haggling, right? It probably gives you, as Anvesha had told me, a very sabzi mandi kind of feel, right? When I say negotiation, you probably are imagining a corporate setup, people in suits. But when I say haggling, you probably think of an auntie haggling with an auto rickshaw driver, right? That's negotiation, right? Make it look like a stalemate, transaction, win-win situation. Yeah, that's a good one. Convincing, settlement, building rapport, consensus, a very nice word, banter, agreement, give and take. That's a very good one, right? Nice. So clearly, most of you think of it as bargain, agreement, money, right? I think clearly most of us think of it as money as well. Very nice. Deal, of course, right? So hopefully, I think obviously all of us have a very interesting perspective of the word negotiation, right? And let's kind of get back to the slide. I'll stop share and get back to sharing. But thank you. Loving this participation. Let's keep it as real as possible. And here are some images from my side as to, when I think of negotiation in a bit more deeper way, like I said, there's always wet market bargaining, right? I mean, we love to do this. I think no matter, whether it's useful, whether it really helps us in life or not, a lot of us, I think many of you would probably agree that many of us probably negotiate just for the sake of negotiating, like a nice emotional win in the day that, oh, I got the tomatoes or the onion, 2 or 3 rupees cheaper, right? That's, I guess, a very common form. The auto rickshaw negotiation, I'm sure, is very common. Of course, you guys are students. You guys probably are thinking of salary negotiations, right? That's a pretty big one that's going to come up. But let me tell you this, right, from my personal story. So my journey has been this, right? I grew up in Pune. I did my till my class 8 in St. Vincent's in Pune. I was born in Kolkata but brought up in Pune. My parents are there. I moved to Indonesia, right? I did my high schooling from there. And there I had probably one of my very important negotiations in life was when I finished class 12, where do I go for college? So I'd applied as like everyone else. I'd applied many places. I got selected into IIT Kharagpur through the NRI quota. And then I also got selected into NUS in Singapore. And I remember sitting on in a restaurant in Jakarta with my parents on June 22nd. You can't see screen? Okay, thanks for letting me know. Can you see screen now? Hopefully, yeah, all good, cool. So yeah, on my birthday, I remember when I was 18, I'm negotiating with my parents. I really wanted to get to NUS. My dad really wanted me to go to IIT Kharagpur. Why? Simply because he went to IIT Kharagpur, right? So he thought he's a proud father. He wanted me to go there. But I negotiated hard, saying, look, it doesn't feel right to kind of get into such a premium institution on an NRI quota basis, paying 50 times the normal fees, and I had a few other reasons. And yeah, I finally won the battle. Glad I got to go where I wanted to. Then, after my NUS degree, I joined the Singapore government. I joined a body called International Enterprise Singapore, which helps negotiate trade agreements between countries. There's a joke in Singapore saying, for example, one of the biggest deals that I was part of is when Singapore government as well as Singtel, the telecom operator in Singapore, acquired a majority stake in Airtel. And back then there was a joke that, you Indians speak a lot, we Indians speak a lot, and every time we Indians speak a lot, Singapore makes 1/3 the money because Singapore owns 1/3 of Airtel. Just a joke, right? So again, there I got a first-hand experience into how do you negotiate trade contracts. So India and Singapore have this trade agreement called CECA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Act, right? That's a very serious negotiation between two countries as to, what will I trade at what price? Can your people come to my country at what, will they get free visa? And it's a massive document. And to actually see that firsthand, it's insane that you actually get to kind of see two countries negotiate a document so seriously between the Ministry of Trade on both sides. And it was very interesting because obviously I still am an Indian citizen, but I was on the Singapore counterpart, right? I'm negotiating with India. And then I joined the time when I was in Symbiosis. That was the time when I joined a Singapore brand consulting firm, and I was back in India for 2 years out of Pune. And that was probably a massive failure of my life. For 2 years, I really struggled to sell because and that's again, right? That's part of learning as to that I was negotiating so poorly In 2 years, I managed to sell only one deal. All I was doing was, pitching and meeting people, but that was a very, very pathetic failure, but great learning for me at someone else's cost. And I realized I couldn't do that for too long. Someone wasn't going to pay me for too long and not succeed. And that's when I joined an Indian digital marketing company, but as head of sales, I joined and negotiated getting back to Singapore. And that was fabulous. It's a company called Pinstorm out of Mumbai, headquartered there, still exists. And I headed sales. And that was my foray into digital marketing. And for 2.5 years, great learning in terms of sales. As one of the sirs was earlier saying, that we were negotiating not just contracts, we were negotiating salaries, we were negotiating contracts with Google as a vendor. We were also negotiating on a daily basis in terms of ideas, right? So corporate negotiation, again, obviously is a huge part. And then when Happy Marketer started, a completely new, different set of negotiations came into my life because I was a shareholder. It was my own company. So I had to negotiate with my business partner, how much equity would I get, right? Then we were hiring employees on a very regular basis. How much salary would we get? How much leave would they get, right? So when you're negotiating contracts or when you're running a business, you're negotiating every day. So just want to impress upon you that negotiation is something that we do every day, right? Sometimes a lot of the negotiations is with ourselves, in our heads. Should I do this? Should I not do that? That's a negotiation. So I think very important is to kind of firstly, like I said, have an open mind. What is negotiation and what is not, right? So like I said, country to country negotiations, internal negotiations, that's a negotiation. So a lot of college students tend to think it's only salary. And trust me, salary is just one bit, and we'll touch upon that, right? But when you get to a corporate or when you start your business, you're negotiating every day. So you've got to get very comfortable with that fact, right? All right, let's move further. What are some of the other kind of negotiations? As a new parent, I can tell you I'm negotiating with my kid every day. It's a tough one. If anyone's a parent here, I'm sure you would agree. Negotiating with young kids, I have a 4-year-old. It's a tough one. It's pretty much a lost cause. So that's again a very different from as you guys take on that role. That's going to be an interesting negotiation every day. If you guys have boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wife, that's another negotiation. In fact, the art of choosing a partner, that's a negotiation. If you have options, that's a good point to be, I can tell you. It's been a while since I've been at that point. So if you're at that, negotiate hard. Because, the precedents that you set early, of course, if you're in a love relationship, of course, all is hunky-dory initially. But remember, literally living that relationship, the early first 2-3 years of romantic life, the precedents that you set, that's going to carry on for a long time. So again, that's a negotiation. Yeah. Tough negotiations, terrorists, right? So some of you may or may not remember this, but some of the older people would remember in 99, India had a very tough negotiation on IC-814 when a lot of passengers were kind of, held as hostages in Kandahar. And that was a terrible, and I'm sure there have been many such terrorist negotiations that happened, every year. But this is something that, somehow is still very fresh in my memory. I was in class 10 and I remember seeing this live, and it was a daunting moment. And of course, I wasn't happy like most Indian citizens because, in exchange for passengers, we released some notorious terrorists who came to kind of haunt us back later in the 2004 Parliament crisis, Parliament attacks, so on and so forth, right? So like I said, certain negotiations have implications for decades. Just want to impress that upon you. So remember, there are negotiations in your personal life, professional lives at a national level, and it's an art or a science worth pursuing. And when we were discussing this session, Karan talked about, sometimes many of us are not comfortable with it because negotiations by definition, in your head, there's an image of me versus you, us versus them. And automatically, as humans, I don't think most of us like conflict. So most of us probably start from the position of not liking the process of negotiation. But trust me, if you take it in the right spirit, negotiations don't have to be, many of you said rightfully, win-win, right? You have to have that positive mindset that you're here to solve a problem. You're here not to say, I win, you lose. Moment you take that position, I think you're on a slippery slope and you'll never enjoy that process. So you got to, through the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, as you start your career especially, or relationships, I think it's important to get comfortable with the position of negotiation. And hence, remember, you got to play a long game. And I was sharing this earlier with some of your colleagues here, that I think many of us take a very short-term view. It's that bhajiwala negotiation, that I have to negotiate and I have to get that 2 rupee just for my egotistic win. And sometimes we forget to ask, why am I negotiating? Can I not just let go? Can I not let that hardworking helper or helper or maid at my home win that negotiation? Like I'm hearing from my parents right now that in our colony in Viman Nagar in Pune, there's a constant battle during COVID that should we pay the helper or should we not pay the helper, right? It's a difficult argument. At a very logical level, it's like, yeah, they're not doing work, so why should they get paid? But if I look at a bigger picture of, do I want to play a longer game? Do I want to have a helper or a guide at home or a cook who can serve me for a long term? Then I would ask myself a very different question. Can I take care of them now during a very difficult time where they could lose jobs, their livelihoods, their kids' education? Maybe I'll win goodwill, right? So remember what you're negotiating for and what's the time horizon. Negotiation is all about, a lot of it is about time horizon, right? Remember that. And that brings me to the next question. So if we get to Slido, let me again stop sharing. If you go back, I'll activate. Oops, sorry. Let me stop sharing. Yep. And let me get to this. But before that, yeah, first question, right? I want to get on a question of, if you're on Slido, you'll see a live question on how confident do you feel about negotiation skills? Let's kind of quickly get that out of the way. Yeah. I'm going to again get to presentation mode. And let me share screen. You guys are able to see the Slido screen? Yeah, awesome. I find these 1 to 5 very interesting. Most answers always end up being the middle 3. But let's see, still some time. We have about 83, 84 respondents. Let's see. All right, I'll stop when we get to 100. A few more. All right, about 100 plus. So we have mode of around, most of you feel 2 to 3. So I'll take it as not that confident. If it was 3 and 4, as the majority, I would have taken it as confident, but I'll take it as not so confident, right? In fact, I would love it if on the chat window, some of you guys could just maybe share why, if you've said 2 or 3, why do you think you're not confident or, not very okay with the process of negotiation? Just feel free to kind of put that out as I stop share, and let's see what you guys have to say. Feel free to just put it out there on chat as to, all right, someone says hard to deal with conflict. Yeah, conflict is never easy. Anything else? Why do you guys not feel confident about?
Sir, I do not like confrontations, and I feel like negotiations are sort of confrontations,
Yeah,
which might offend the other person. Yeah.
Yeah. Feels too much to ask from the other side. Lost every negotiation. The mother. I think our parents might have scarred us through negotiations during our childhood.
Sometimes I feel that, because it's considered to be such a skill and we do it just for the sake of, trying to be good at it.
Yeah.
We end up, even after realizing that it's a fair value in question that has been offered or given, we end up maybe in the process of trying to negotiate more, it reflects poorly on our character.
Yeah.
And so this is a thought that is always on the back of my head, which also kind of, then I'm not very good negotiator. I haven't been much of a negotiator yet. So I think that's one of the inhibitions that I've had.
No, fair. Thanks for sharing that. I think all of us have that. I think we want to come across as nice, fair. And I think if we take that middle, nice, fair approach, it's just, we're bound to feel, even when you win, you feel that, damn, I'm sure all of us have gone through that. Like I've gone through this for sure, that I think especially, if I'm negotiating with someone who I feel is not economically well-to-do, whether it's a vegetable vendor or auto rickshaw, to be honest, after a while, I've stopped negotiating.
Yes.
Especially when I'm negotiating on that front. But I think if I'm negotiating with an unruly boss or a employee who I think is being, or a manager who I think is being unfair to employees, I think to me there, the negotiation tactics to me are like, I better negotiate, else I'm not doing my job, right? So I really appreciate the sentiment. And I think it's very important to be honest with each other as to this whole question of why am I negotiating and what am I negotiating for? And it's very critical. And you bring a very good point that it's important not to just counter and negotiate for the sake of haggling, right? I think we've all been through that process, and it's important to bear this in mind. That I think in any art or science, it's important to know when to use that tool or weapon. Ultimately, negotiation is a tool, right? It's a process we learn, it's a tool. So it's good that we share this, but loving the answers. I think most of us have this thing of wanting to be fair, or the heated argument or negotiation never feels good. I think someone spoke about not knowing where to start. Like, should I lead? Will I come across as rude? I know in my organization or experience, a lot of women unfortunately have this view that, hey, if I negotiate, I might come across this, very like someone who's playing hardball or as rude. Will that affect my image going forward? I think those are very, very fair questions. And I would say don't fight that. I think if you feel uncomfortable, so be it. Just reflect on it. And I think you will be in a better position to, if you acknowledge it. And I think you will use, if that's your feeling, you will learn to use it in the right place. So I think if there's one thing I would submit to all of you is know that it's a tool, know that it can help you, but also question yourself when to use it and when not to use it, right? That's important. All right, awesome. Thanks for kind of sharing this. I'm going to get back to my slide. So, typically, when you're negotiating, like I said, that came out in your slide, or most of us tend to think of it as money, but money is just one. To me, honestly, my biggest learning for negotiation has been freedom, independence. So and I'm not referring to terrorism, that, when you're freeing a hostage. When I negotiated a contract, I think a lot of times people don't tend to negotiate for independence, freedom, your free will. That means, for example, when I'm negotiating a contract with a client, of course, in the earlier days, I would do whatever it takes to get the most of the money. So money it's a given. We are all negotiating for a higher salary. But sometimes, let's say on the salary case, when you're negotiating for salary, would you like it if you could negotiate that, I'm going to take a little bit of less pay, but I'm only going to work half a day. Trust me, most Indians, we don't. Our mindset is to maximize money. But when I negotiate with Europeans, I've seen so many freelancers, so many contractors who would say, I only work 12 to 4, take it or leave it. Pay me a little less money. It's a very refreshing thought process. In Asia, we are just taught to maximize and maximize money. Very few of us value our time. But in today's world, the gig economy, many of you might be contractors, freelancers, or even if you're in the agency world as you guys go out, I would urge you, as you guys get to a good position, is don't just negotiate for money, negotiate for time. Something that we don't value enough is negotiating time. Because our typical answer is, sir, हाँ हो जाएगा sir. Weekend काम करना पड़ेगा, हो जाएगा sir. रात को काम करना पड़ेगा, हो जाएगा. Because we just want, and that's probably coming from a good position. We want to show hunger. We want to show that we are keen. But as you go through life, you'll realize, you will have to value time, because most of you would probably go into agencies, consulting firms, or client side. And especially if you're on the agency, client side, servicing side, what's your biggest asset? Ideas and time. So remember, put a price on your idea and your time. Because if you don't do, I'm sure all of you would have seen those memes on Facebook and LinkedIn, that what the client desires versus what the client budget is, right? Those funny memes. And it's very easy to bitch about clients and say, oh, client ke paas paisa nahi hai, they don't give me money. But the problem is with us. We don't value our time and idea, right? If you notice, and I'll come to that. Hopefully you'll get a picture of, what I'm trying to get. But please do value your time. And when you negotiate, value for money, but also know that you can negotiate for freedom as to what tools you can use, when can you work, where can you work out of. For example, a lot of my new employees, they actually negotiate saying, I'm only going to work half day in the office. The other half day I'll work from co-working or cafe. I'm like, cool, that works as long as the work gets done, right? So some people say, I want to negotiate a low base, but I want a kick-ass commission. People who are willing to, negotiate freedom, or they want to negotiate, because again, most of us, especially in the Indian ecosystem or even Chinese or Asian ecosystem, having lived in Singapore, Indonesia, we have all been brought up with the mindset of, boss, negotiate a very high salary, fixed salary. But very few parents, very few schools of thought teachers ki yaar, ask for low salary, but ask for a very high bonus or commission. And if you study economics, you'll realize companies actually don't mind giving you fixed salaries because they, fixed salary means once negotiated, it's done. But smart employees who are really hungry, they will use the clever trick of this. Sir, give me half the base salary, no problem. But I need 50% commission on the deal that I can bring in. Or if I can get my client to upsell, or if I can upsell or cross sell, I need a higher variable component. Because they know, A, they're showing hunger by asking for less salary, but they're also fighting for their own benefit that, hey, if I help my company, I'm going to get a lion's share of the pie, right? So there are various ways you can cut it. So like I said, always remember, there is nothing called industry practice, no matter who tells you. Everything is negotiable. It's up to you. It's up to your holding position and how keen are you to negotiate. Yeah. So remember that. All right. Our next question. We're going to get back to Slido again. Question is, do you always get to negotiate, right? So if you get back to Slido, right, I'm going to stop sharing. The next question that you will see on Slido is, name certain shops or brands where you can't negotiate or where you haven't been able to negotiate. Think of scenarios where you just could not negotiate. All right, once we get to 50, I'm going to put that word cloud on. Lovely, loving it, loving the diversity of opinions. That's it. You guys get the drift, right? All right, I'm going to put it out there on, let me share screen. All right. Fabulous. Let's see this build up as we get to 100. I love there is one brand out there. Everyone knows you can't negotiate an Apple iPhone or an iPad, right? You will negotiate with your parents for money. You'll negotiate with yourself whether you should spend or not. But you can't call up Mr. Tim Cook or anyone else to say, boss, 5% discount dena. It'll feel awkward. You will feel bad. Am I negotiating with Apple? But funny thing is, auto rickshaw wale ke saath chalta hai, 10 rupees, right? So feel that emotion as you imagine, why can't I negotiate with Apple? Why can't I negotiate with Starbucks? Correct. Have you ever gone? So many pav bhaji wala, vada pav you can negotiate. But you will never go to a Starbucks and say, boss, Frappuccino at 20 rupee less, right? That person will say, buzz off. Mangoes during summer. That's a very good example. That mangoes during summer. Correct, right? Because it's a function of demand and supply, right? High-end stores, fixed price, big bazaar. Have you seen those sari shops which have that nice logo there? Fixed price, no bargaining. Yeah. Awesome. Restaurants, right? There's a fixed price. Take it or leave it, right? Shiv Vada Pav. I like that. That's a very good example. Even in Vada Pav, you can't negotiate. If Mr. Shiv tells you, you can't negotiate. So these are very good examples because you know what? Typically, everyone says Apple or Starbucks. But the point is, doesn't matter. You could be selling whatever you want. You could be the next agency. You could be Accenture. You could be anyone. It will come to you, PVR, right? Even on a relatively small ticket price of 200, 150 rupees, it's a fixed price. But I love this example of Shiv Vada Pav. The other professional services, hospital, chance hi nahi hai. Especially if you're going accident emergency, they can ask 5 lakhs, you will give it, you will figure it out. Law firms, no ways, very difficult because typically these are scenarios where you're going when the need is very high, right? Very, very high, very, very hard to kind of negotiate. Luxury brands that are given. I love cigarettes, fantastic example, right? Again, these are all functions of just the demand and the need. The reason what you guys have done here is so fantastic is because, you know, people tend to think it's only luxury brands. Not true, right? In fact, I'll take from today's, my learning has been Shiv Vada Pav. That in Shiv Vada Pav as well, in Vada Pav, you can ensure that there is no negotiation. Fantastic answers here. Loving it, right? All right, I'm going to go back. So remember why you're negotiating, what you're negotiating for, and fundamentally, what are some scenarios that you can't negotiate, because everywhere you can't negotiate, right? So of course I had my initial examples: Louis Vuitton, Apple, Cafe Coffee Day. Typically can't negotiate. Now you can replace Cafe Coffee Day with Shiv Vada Pav. You can replace it with anything else, right? And like I said, it could be something even in commodities like sari shops, apparel, etc. If the buyer puts the sticker fixed rate, sorry, no bargaining, right? It's a positioning. It's a perception that you create, and of course you have to hold it. Now let's say you put this and no one's coming to your shop, then fad gayi, so to speak, right? Then from next week onwards, you're back. Please take it at 50. Then suddenly, instead of that sign, you will put a 50% off, right? Discount mein le lo, right? So a lot of the sari shops, for example, if you go to Tulsi Bagh and Mandai, those areas, there is a lot of back-end cartelization. There is, these groups come together and say, boss, I can't alone. I'm selling sari. Sari is ultimately a commodity, right? Unless I'm a Satyapal or a Sabyasachi. That's a different ball game. That's in the luxury category. But a lot of these, whether you're selling vegetables or whether you're selling vada pav or saris, if it's a commodity and you have to negotiate, then there has to be some sort of a group alignment. Ki boss, for the sake of benefit of our entire industry, no one's allowed to do it. If one of them chickens out, problem. And I'll tell you where this real problem is. In my industry, in the industry many of you would go into for jobs, the agency world. We are notorious. We are notorious to cut each other's throats, right? Including myself. I'm being very honest. Because why? The supply is so high in India, right? In Bombay, Pune, Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore. There's an agency in every nook and corner. Big agency, WPP, Dentsu, which today we are part of, Havas, Group M, whatever, or small independent agencies, right? The problem is because of oversupply and because of a lack of this alignment in the supply agency side, the buyer, of course, it's a buyer's market. I'm going to call for a pitch, 30 agencies will come. Clients also very chalu. Client will say, oh, here's the brief. 30 agencies, everyone's willing to cut each other's throat and say, you know what, I'm going to work the next 1 month for free. I'll give you free pitches and the client will pick one. Think of the economics. What happens to the other 30 agencies? They have wasted 1 month of free pitching time, right? So the smarter agencies, so very honestly, so what do you do? The question is, what do you do? You have only two choices, to be honest. One choice we figured is either we have to do something that no one else can do. So then there is no negotiation. Boss, take it or leave it. I'm not pitching. Or there is no choice but to play on price. So the two choices you always have is, can you build a product or a service that is unique and that helps differentiate you, which strengthens your negotiation process or your power, or you have to play the price game. And as you all know, price is never sustainable. Today you're doing cheaper, kal ko nukkad mein one more guy will do your digital marketing cheaper. Today India thinks we are cheap, tomorrow trust me, by the way, India is not cheap at all. Today Vietnam, Philippines is way cheaper. So that's how India lost the BPO, KPO game. We thought we'll start Infosys, Wipro, etc. 5,000, 10,000, 15 rupees salary. For 5-10 years it worked. But now Philippines does it way cheaper. India lost the BPO, KPO game completely. So remember, price is never a differentiator. Because there are some people who offer things for free. Can someone tell me or put it on chat, what are some services that you and I use for free every day? Let's see. Exactly, right? So you literally open your smartphone, everything is free. Google search, Gmail, Google Maps. It's like we take it for granted, right? Exactly. The point is, so remember price generally, right? Again, I'm talking from a, as you guys get into the industry, join agencies, consulting firms, remember, when you're negotiating for pitches, etc., don't do yourself and your company a disservice to just, cut price. And because all of us go through the same nonsensical process where we tell ourselves, yeah, let's give 20% discount, ghus jate, and then we'll make it. Trust me, once you pitch low, you can never go up. Right? It's very, very hard. So the only way is Agencies who succeed, who do well, or any services company for that matter, is if they actually build a product or service that's differentiated, like an Apple, Samsung. So there is actual product differentiation, or there is perceptual differentiation. So when you guys said luxury brand, etc., what is Satyapal? What is Sabyasachi? It's ultimately Ghagra Choli, Sari. But the brand perception, which you guys obviously learn about brand marketing, etc., there they play on the brand. What is Apple? I'm sure you talk to any Samsung guy. I'm sure every Samsung guy by now says, "Arey, Apple is late to the game. They are copycats, but they charge so much." But guess what? That is because we humans, we like to believe that we humans are rational, logical buyers. We humans are emotional buyers, but we are rational justifiers. We always buy on emotional triggers. Example, car. You ask a guy who spends 25, 30 lakhs for Maruti, why did you spend? He will say horsepower this, uska chassis is that. But has he ever opened the bonnet? Did he ever open the chassis? No. He went for that TriStar logo, right? Because he bought it for prestige. Ultimately, a Toyota, Mazda, Mercedes, what is it? When the roads of Pune are equally good or bad, it's ultimately an automobile to take you from A to B, right? But someone is willing to pay 3x the price for a car versus the functional utility of a Toyota or a Honda, purely because emotional play. So anyway, coming back to the point is, when you're from a service perspective, industry perspective, remember, you have to figure out a differentiator, which is either a genuine product or service differentiator, something that you do that. And in services, it's very hard, I must tell you, because ultimately, what is a services business? It's a people business. It's a team business. So either your team can do things faster or better, or they'll be forced to do cheaper. And you don't want to get to that cheaper place. Because by cheaper, not only are you doing yourself, your company a disservice, but your industry a disservice, right? So just wanted to impress upon that point, fundamentally, that everything is negotiable. Remember that. Most importantly, remember why you're negotiating. Negotiation is a tool. You don't have to negotiate always. Find places where it's worthwhile. Yeah. And remember, there are, like you said, Shiv Vada Pav, Apple. As a service provider, if you have a good brand positioning, if you have good solid product capabilities, if you have good people, and if you're here for the long run, you can be the Shiv Vada Pav of your industry. I'm actually going to patent that. I love that. Whoever typed it. You can, again, right? Even in a commodity world, be the Shiv Vada Pav. Yeah. All right. And the question is, why do we want to or need to negotiate, right? It's not just money. I want to quickly give you a framework. So some of these are also frameworks, bit theoretical. I'll try to make it realistic, but bear with me, because hopefully you'll get a broader perspective so that you can remember some of these concepts and think about it. Because obviously, right, in a 1 hour session, we can't become experts. It's a lifelong learning process. So remember, you're negotiating. The first thing everyone wants is cost, right? Ghar kharidna hai, negotiate. Sabzi, negotiate, because you want to reduce the cost, because you want to get a price advantage. But sometimes, remember, it's not the price, it's the value. It's also about what value you want to derive, which is not necessarily price. You want to probably sometimes, when a client negotiates with Happy Marketer or Denso, sometimes they say, boss, paisa is not the problem, but meko kaam kal chahiye. So they're negotiating for time. Or sometimes they'll say, Prantik, I'm negotiating with you, price I'll give you whatever, but I want the best team. This is the creative director I want on the team, right? So they're negotiating value, not price. And remember, if you're on the buyer side, negotiating for price is actually sometimes can be the most stupidest thing. So if you're on the client side, remember, your idea is not to just get the cheapest quote that even a machine can do. Then you don't need to be in the procurement team, right? Your idea is to get the best value. Price is only a determinant of value. Have you got the best team? Have you got the best terms and conditions? For example, some client will say, Acha, I'm going to give you a 5-year contract at a very good rate, but you can't work with competition, right? Value. So be smart. Remember this. Don't fall for the sabji mandi bhaji wala negotiation. Price, honestly, right, as you grow in life, you'll realize price is one of the worst things to negotiate for. That's why, as I was telling you, I've stopped negotiating with sabji mandi wala, because firstly, I feel guilty. Even though I feel emotionally like, oh, wow, I saved 100 rupee, but that's stupid. But if I can think long term, I will be smarter about my negotiation. Next is KPIs and SLAs. That means time. What is SLA? Service level agreement. You will give me the best time, time of delivery. You will give me best servicing for an automotive that I buy. Or by the way, I'll give you money, but I want higher KPIs. That means if you guys are familiar in digital marketing, let's say if I tell a client, oh, I'm going to give you 100 rupees per click, the client will say, you know what, cool, cost is fine, but I'll negotiate on the quality of the click. Or you know what, you take 1,000 rupees a lead, you take more money, but don't give me a click, you give me a lead. He's negotiating on the quality of the deliverable. Yeah. So remember, it is not just price. Conflict. Like I said, if I'm negotiating with a terrorist or a hostage, scenario, I'm trying to, or rather, a better negotiation would be your classic, yeah, India, Pakistan, or China, trying to negotiate for who owns Kashmir, right? You're trying to resolve a conflict which is extremely difficult, right? A problem is it's an open problem. Hey, how do I solve this problem? It's a very, very interesting problem that you're negotiating, right? And this is typically internal conflict. Again, remember, negotiation doesn't always have to be me versus you. The sooner you change and reframe the problem that actually we are on the same team, we're trying. That means, when I go and negotiate with the client, my first thing is to be, someone said on the Slido, rapport. That boss, it's not client versus agency, it's client and agency. We are trying to solve your marketing problem. We are trying to help you build digital marketing solutions so that you can sell better, so that you can build a better brand. Moment I become a person on their side, they look at it very differently. They don't negotiate as radically with me, right? Quality, agreement, so on and so forth. So keep this chart in your mind handy. What am I negotiating for, right? Remember, cost should be your last. Can you get value? Can you get agreement? Can you get better people? Can you get better quality? Can you get better timelines? So on and so forth. Same now, if I have a heart attack, I would want to negotiate, boss, money is not the question. I want the best surgeon, right? Same logic. All right, what's the negotiation process? I remember Karan telling me that negotiation doesn't come easily. It doesn't come easily to everyone, trust me. But it's important hence to believe it can be learned, it can be mastered over time, and there is a theoretical part to it, which I'll share the steps of negotiation, but there is no there's no better way than to kind of go through this process on a regular basis. So the faster you kind of accept that negotiation is not bad, it's a tool. It's up to you whether you use it for good or bad. Same like gun. Gun was not invented for terrorism. Gun was Mr. Alfred Nobel, who made the dynamite, he made it for a particular reason, for construction, etc. Then if someone uses dynamites and bombs for a different reason, I suppose that's not his problem, right? So same way, it's a process, it's a tool, it's up to you how you use it. So like with anything else, like sales, people say, oh, no, I'm not a natural salesman. No, everyone has some degree of natural skills, but even sales can be learned. Everything can be learned. Believe in it. It's a question of your gumption, your tenacity, your perseverance. So the typical process is, right, a lot of negotiation in our head is that haggling part. But the best negotiators, lawyers, contract negotiators, it's what happens behind the scenes. It's the preparation, planning, the definition and the ground rules, the unsexy part. Because when I think of lawyers, it's the Boston legal, it's the suits wala scene. But if you talk to all your lawyer friends, there is no Harvey and Mike in most real life. It's a very rudimentary process. How do I know? I've seen that when I sold my company to Denso. Took 2 years. Trust me, it's a very dry process. I'm very happy I didn't turn up to be a lawyer. There is only maybe 5% of the Mike and Harvey and Boston legal wala drinking whiskey and negotiating. It's otherwise a very dry 100-page document going through clause by clause. It requires patience. It requires knowledge. It requires information. It requires a lot of in-depth analysis and preparation and clarification. It is really a lot of Word document and marking up documents. It is a lot about language. Because I realized when I negotiated and sold my company to Denso, like on one simple word of English, we would negotiate for 3 months. A word, a language could have massive nuances which could change my life for the next 7 years. For example, non-compete. That Prantik, you have sold Happy Marketer to Denso. We had to negotiate so hard. Now, non-compete by simple means, acha, you sold Happy Marketer, Tomorrow, you can't go set up happy marketer too. True. But the nuances of that, what does happy marketer mean? What can I actually do, not do? Does it gel with the law of the land? Because if you're telling me, Prantik, you can't do digital marketing, I can go to court and say, hey, boss, are you actually stopping me from making a living? Can you do that by Singapore or India's law? So there's a lot of nuance to it. So what I'm trying to get at is it's a process. The biggest thing I've learned in negotiation, there are three things, and I'll talk about the other two in a bit, but it's the preparation. Then what am I negotiating for? Your biggest leverage in negotiation is information. The person or the team who has more negotiation or more information or more timely information is always in a better position to crack a better deal, right? But remember, better deal does not mean I won, you lost. You take that position, you're not solving a problem, right? But remember, it's a process, it can be learned. So the more you spend time reading about the problem, so assuming you're, like I said, right, assuming you're trying to sell to a client, or you're trying to sell, let's say you're already with a client, you're trying to creatively negotiate and sell this idea. Ki boss, this idea will work, right? If you just go and show him the idea, ki boss, I thought of this creative idea, this is the storyboard, you have to go with it. 99% or 9 out of 10 times he'll say, boss, buzz off, it will not work. So you have to do some research and insight that, hey, why did I propose this idea? Why do I think this idea will work? Or sometimes you'll have to come with 3 ideas. So to cleverly position to the client, hey, look, here is your market audience. Here is who you're trying to sell Fevicol to. Here is the target demography. Here is the psychography. Here are 3 solutions I thought of. Now, based on the 3 solutions, I think option A will work best because of this. What am I doing? I'm taking the client through my thinking process as opposed to going and saying, boss, here is the banner ad, this will work. Because you as the creative person, you might have probably already gone through the process. But the art of negotiating with a client by taking him through or taking her through your thinking process, that's also negotiation. Because ultimately, what's negotiation? You want to come to an agreement, right? Or you want to resolve a conflict. So remember, it's not always about money. Yeah. So once you're into a client and you're an account manager, account exec, you're negotiating every day, right? Hey, can I deliver 2 days later? My team needs a bit more time. Or hey, boss, here are my 3 creatives. I really think you need to go with this. The question is why. So you need to show the research, the insights, and the thinking process. So that requires preparation, planning, clarifying the brief. For example, most of us struggle is we see a brief and we assume this is what the client is saying. So when we do a project, the more time you spend with the client thrashing the brief as to what does the brief mean? Why did you send this brief? Or debate the brief. Most of us tend to immediately want to jump and create a solution. That's human tendency. But pause. Defining a problem, crystallizing a problem statement, just the way in science experiments in schools, you would define hypothesis, assumptions, same way in the agency client world, you got to do the same. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? If you know, many of us, we take a month to define a problem. Defining problems sounds easy, but it's way harder than defining a solution. And if you screw that up, everything's going to get screwed downstream, right? So again, impressing upon you is don't jump to conclusions and executions. Spend time, invest time, because in that process, what happens, you build trust and relationship as you interact with the client. Yeah. All right. This is another important thing that I've learned. Adopt a win-win mindset. I'm going to give you a framework. X-axis, Y-axis, as with most things in life. X-axis is concern about your own outcomes. This is typically, of course, we as humans by nature are egotistic. Our fight mindset comes in. We want the best for us. So by nature, we all know we are always fighting for what's best for us, right? I've hardly seen a human being who comes and says, "Nay, I don't care about my own interests," right? Let's face it, we are all selfish, and naturally so, right? But what matters when you're negotiating or defining the negotiating problem as to what are we negotiating for? What are we trying to solve for? You got to think of the other side. That's the Y-axis. So if you look at the X-axis and Y-axis, what's win-win? Win-win is when you think of the problem to be solved as opposed to I want to win and you have to lose. It's a very subtle but different mindset. I gave you the example in the client agency world. If you're negotiating, for example, with a child, right? If I'm negotiating with my child, saying, you know what, typical negotiation that, hey, if you do this, you're going to get a carrot or you're going to get a chocolate, right? But I don't know if that's necessarily always a good thing to do with a child, because you're setting a precedence. That means, oh, only if you give me a chocolate, I will do the homework. But if I, of course, when a child is very young, it's hard to explain. But as a child grows up, if I try and make him or her understand that, hey, look, the reason I'm telling you to do a homework or go and exercise or whatever is to help you. So I think as a human being matures, if you start positioning the problem or co-defining the problem with the other human, I think it becomes much easier, right? So remember, if it's going to be, avoiding conflict, that means low. That means neither party is thinking about the other side. Then you want to avoid each other, and you want to avoid confrontation. But if you take a very different position, so in many negotiations, there is a typical technique which says, which is called open the kimono, which means literally go and open all your cards. Saying, boss, you know what? Like, I literally had this yesterday. Me and my counterpart, both of us report to a boss. We were negotiating of a particular project should come to my line of business or her line of business, right? Both of us, I thought we were very smart. We were very honest. Initial 2 meetings, we were really avoiding each other because we knew ki yaar, we're going to put our boss in a difficult position, and he will have to make a either or choice, which is not good for anyone. But then we met separately, we aligned, saying, look, ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to do good for Dentsu Singapore. We're trying to do good for the business. Let's brainstorm and think little bit of compromise here and there, give and take, as someone said, so that we can solve the problem and we can do good and do right for the business. And eventually we kind of came to a very aligned solution where the CEO was very happy because he's like, hey, not bad. You guys figured out a way to solve the problem, right? So remember, there's no point of dominating or yielding or compromise. Yes, see, give and take is a much better word. Compromise, the connotation in the word compromise is someone lost. But give and take is a bit more palatable. That, what, I gave something, I got something. And at the end of the day, the problem got solved, right? That's what matters. So remember, when you start thinking about it, I have really found it, like I have found when I've negotiated with people, some of the best negotiators are people who are quiet, who are calm. Like typically we tend to think of negotiators as loud, hagglers, fighting. Again, that happens in films and movies and Netflix shows. Some of the best lawyers, they're the most calm, composed, because they know what they want. They know why are they negotiating. Their tone, their voice, they don't tend to antagonize people, right? So as you notice, even when I speak, if I slow down, right? If I soften my voice, my body language, I just give very different vibes, right? As opposed to if I start speaking loudly, faster, etc., I would just come across as someone very different, right? So again, these are small skill sets: the tone, the body language, the speed of how I negotiate, whether I smile or not. These are all signals that we are giving to the other side, right? Ultimately, like I said, we're all trying to solve a problem or trying to come to an agreement. So it's not just the logicality or the logic part of the argument. It's the emotional quotient of your negotiation. It's the eyes, right? If assuming you're negotiating with me and I'm looking down, automatically I would be uncomfortable, right? If I'm negotiating with my wife as to, should we buy this house or not? If she's not looking at me, if she's on the phone, I already have got the signal that, boss, this is not happening, right? But if we take a different position and interact and discuss in a nice way, the process becomes very different. And again, it's absolutely okay to agree to disagree. To me, that's a very mature way of handling that. What? Sorry, client says, agency, nahi yaar, you're not right for this project. That's fine. But remember, if you're playing the long game, you want to build goodwill and trust. No, koi nahi, aaj nahi mila, but he'll remember hopefully that, what, Prantik tried hard. Next year, I'll at least think of it. So remember, don't shortchange yourself. Life is a long game. All of us in this room are likely to live 70, 80, maybe 100 years. So your careers are likely to be 40, 60 years. So sometimes, be it salary, be it our project, we tend to just think very short term. Kal ka salary, kal ka bonus. But remember, you are here to play a long game. You're here to build reputation. And people who build reputation, like Apple, the same logic applies. One of the best ways to build your negotiation power is to build your reputation, credibility, and goodwill. Focus on that. Yeah. All right. I know I'm kind of running short of time. Let me kind of move ahead. Always know your BATNA and your leverage. This is something you might have come across as terms in your negotiation courses. BATNA. What is BATNA? BATNA is best alternative. Yeah. So here is what BATNA is in a very simple graphical way. Imagine someone's selling a house, someone's buying a house, right? So if I want to sell this, let's say I'm the seller and one of you is a buyer. I want to sell the house for 1 crore. The buyer says, "Nahin, I have only 80 lakhs. I think only 80 lakhs, right?" Now, the depending on the seller ka desperation, how keen he is to sell, he might say, "You know what? My best is 90 lakhs. Uske niche I'm not going to sell." But buyer, maybe he's okay to go up to 95, right? So this position between 90 and 95 is called the ZOPA, which is your, it's your best zone. It's your zone to kind of come to an agreement, right? That orange zone. So as a buyer and seller, of course, if both buyer and seller are very transparent, then, maybe eventually after back and forth, you will either figure out or the other party will say, "Boss, 90 lakhs, nothing less, nothing more, man, take it or leave it," right? So BATNA is basically what is your best alternative when you're going to pull off, right? What's your position where you'll not take it, right? All of us have this, that, when you're negotiating for salary, if you want a 5 lakh package and if someone says 2.5, chances are you will not even entertain, right? So it's very, very important to establish. And again, like I said, money actually is very easy because it's a numerical quantity. But let's say when I was negotiating India-Singapore, trade negotiation, it's not always about money. And that's when I realized money negotiation actually are very easy because ultimately it's about a number. Either we'll agree or disagree. But you're negotiating for life, hostage, or you're negotiating for countries' long-term contracts. You're negotiating for various variables. So remember that process, information gathering, either through fact sharing or through signals. It's ultimately very important to know what does the other party want and what is the other party's batna. That party is going to walk away, right? And if you know the other party, so if you're the seller, if you know the buyer's desired price and the buyer's worst case, you roughly know that if I really want to sell, mota, if I will try my best to get to my desired position, but I know where I can sell, right? And that comes through the process of interaction, negotiation, either directly or you get to know through third-party mediators. So sometimes when two people can't negotiate, that's when mediators or interlocutors come into play, right? But this concept is very important. Again, there's a lot of science and art to this. I can't go into detail today, but get this image into your head that each party has a best and a worst case. You want to get to a middle zone, right? What are some kind of BATNAs? One is walking away. Some people stalemate. They'll prolong the deal. If you'll see, like when I'm selling to a client, if they want to negotiate, suddenly 2 weeks, no response. Then I get tensed and worried. Shit, are they interested? Are they interested? Are they playing a poker game with me? Same with job applications. They've applied, interviews went well, 5 rounds. Suddenly HR is quiet. They could be playing a poker game with you because they're testing your patience. How keen are you? Same with a girl and a boy, right? Girls it's a classic. You have sent a message. You're constantly checking WhatsApp, blue tick ho gaya hai, she's not responding. Same, she could be playing a waiting game. Or the reality is she's busy, but it's playing on your mind, right? Negotiation, right? The client could be talking to other buyers, right? The girl could be talking to other boys. Same scenario, right? Clients could have a choice. They are looking at an agency to kind of get the services, but nowadays a lot of clients could in-house it. They said, "Nahi yaar, I think we are still discussing, we might do it in-house." Right? That could be their ploy. In the case of legal case, they could not settle. They may actually go for a court case or a trial. Or let's say if I'm a union, I'm negotiating with a company, I could go on a hartal or a strike, right? So there are various ways to show, "Boss, I'm walking away." Now these could be real or these could be just ploys. And that's the art for you to figure out, right? There's no easy way to know this, right? But it's important to know that when you are negotiating, let's say as a job seeker or as a seller or tomorrow on the client side as a buyer, what is your worst case and best case, right? So that's your BATNA. And remember, you also always, when you're negotiating, you need to know what's your leverage. Like I said, leverage could be time. Boss, mere paas time hai. Like when I'm not that desperate, when I have enough projects in a particular quarter, no problem. Clients not coming back, no problem. I will not follow up. I'll wait. When I'm selling my house, if I have 5 people wanting to buy my house, of course I will not go back to each buyer. I'll wait, right? Or if I know market reality, right? So information that, oh, you know what, my neighboring houses are actually selling. Let's say I want to sell a house at 1 crore, and I know that the last few houses, what kind of leverage can I have? Either I know that last few houses have sold at about 95 lakhs to 1.05 crores, so I'm like, ठीक है, 1 crore में मिल सकता है. Or I could have leveraged that, you know what, the square footage of my house, there are no similar bungalows or houses in that same square footage, so I can actually ask for more. Or I can have leverage by knowing information about the buyer. Ki boss, I've actually found out secretly that these guys have looked at 3 or 4 properties and they actually like my house. So the more information you have, it is your best friend. You can then manipulate, you can use that as leverage in negotiation. Like when we were selling my company, we said, hey boss, you know what, humko nahi bechna hai, we don't want to sell, it's okay. So and that's why we stalled the negotiation for 2 years. We said, no problem, we'll run it. Eventually we could negotiate a lot of terms in our favor because it's okay, and of course they were doing the same, but eventually we knew, we came to a problem solving attitude saying, look, ultimately why are we doing the acquisition? Because Dentsu realized they could benefit, we realized we could benefit with their bigger organization, bigger clients, bigger brands. We knew that there is value in it, but each of us had our bat now. And then finally after 2 years we came to a rough middle point, which worked out for everyone. All right, coming to the same point is, when you're kind of negotiating, it's important to, because if you start from a win-win situation, you should always have the other person's face or other person's reputation in mind, right? Again, if you're playing a long game, remember, insulting the other person, showing the other person down, it'll neither feel good. And remember, if you're many of my friends who are in the buyers, they become very stringent buyers. But suddenly, remember, market changes. Economy is down. Now they are on the agency side. Now they are shuddering. Shit, now I have to sell. Now I have to ask my friend Prantik for a job. Arey shit, but I behaved badly with him last time. So remember, life is a very long game. So even if you're negotiating hard, I'm not saying don't negotiate hard as a buyer, negotiate, but never insult anyone. Never raise your voice. Negotiating does not mean putting someone in a bad position, because classic, again, I'm not here to give moral science lecture, but the reality is never do unto someone what you don't want the other person to do to you. Yeah. Because you never know when you will be on the other side. Yeah. So again, there are simple tricks that, when you're negotiating so in the war room, you could be negotiating hard, but when you're taking coffee breaks, when you're taking breaks, remember, imagine if you're 2 lawyers, you're probably the same classmate from National Law School, but you have to do right by your respective clients. So you're negotiating hard. But that doesn't mean you can't respect and have a comfortable coffee. And, in that process, find out, hey, dude, like, what's your position? What's the best that you can do? Is it a huge high pressure thing? Is your job or reputation at stake? What's at stake for you? And then if you're playing a long game, you can give and take. You can say, okay, you know what? Okay. So some of the best negotiators I've seen, they will say, you know what? Okay, I'll give this. I'll let this deal go. But he or she will remember a favor. He or she, you can pull a favor later and use that as leverage to get a much bigger deal. So if you remember, if you're only thinking transaction, one of you said transaction in the word cloud. If you're only negotiating from transaction to transaction, you can never play the long game. But if you're playing a very large game, what do politicians do? What do late fixers such as Amar Singhs, what do? They are fixers. They are negotiating between party A, party B. They remember favors. They remember information. Hey boss, if you don't do this, I will leak this information about you. That's classic negotiation, right? I'm not saying, again, you want to hurt or be in that position and blackmail. Never do that. All I'm saying is play the long game, use information to your benefit, and sometimes let go. Think of the longer picture, right? Don't spoil anyone's reputation, because tomorrow you could be on the other side. Yeah. I'm going to give you 6 simple negotiation mistakes to avoid, and then I'm going to come to the end. We can do a few Q&As. 6 simple tips or tricks that I've learned is, like I said, A, don't neglect the other side's problem. If the problem is worth not negotiating for, both sides would not be on the table. That means both sides have come to negotiate because the company wants to hire you. just that you're negotiating on salary. If it didn't come to salary negotiation, means you're not even qualified, right? So respect the other person on the other side, right? Maybe he or she has some budget constraint, or maybe they have a constraint right now, but 6 months later things change. Don't presume that just because someone's negotiating hard, he or she is a bad person. Remove the emotion from the problem. Someone could be a very good hard negotiator, but that does not mean they are bad people. Yeah, remove the emotion. Next is letting price bulldoze others' interests, right? Again, like I said, wherever possible, especially in situations where if you think that the other person is not in a very good economic situation, don't negotiate. I've at least taken that philosophy that I don't negotiate with street vendors anymore, right? Honestly, in the long run, doesn't make me feel good, doesn't make me the extra few hundred rupees if I would save in a year. I think life has been kind. I think I can let go, right? Same way in corporate negotiations, right? Don't, because if you make price, then the other person knows you're price sensitive, that you are penny foolish or rather pound foolish, penny wise. Think of value metrics, think of quality, think of SLAs and KPIs. Remember, best negotiators on either side, they negotiate for value and not price. There is a huge difference in price and value, right? Again, searching too hard for common ground. Sometimes, like I said, it's okay. If you can't get to a common ground, it's okay. Okay to agree to disagree, let go. Sometimes maybe you need a break. It's not important that you'll have to find a common thing. Maybe sometimes the negotiations get too acrimonious and you're like, this is hurting our relationship. Never mind. Let's go. Pass. Right? Life is too big. We can move on. Right? Same way, negotiating partners. That means, if you know that, like I said, right? If the Zopa is too far, no point. Let it go. It's okay. Right? So on and so forth. And the last one is your own biases. Sometimes our own perceptual biases come very strongly into a negotiation discussion, and that hurts the process. So hence that preparation, information discovery stage is very important. You got to find facts, you got to discover facts. So don't presume things. Spend a lot of time getting to know the other side, getting to know why they want to negotiate, what is the problem they want to solve, find a common definition of the problem, and try and, as much as possible, like I think someone rightly said, build rapport to try and come together to solve a problem, right? Don't make it a us versus them battle. Last one, let's end on a light note, is I'm going to use, I know bulk of the folks here obviously are from India, so I'm going to use some simple Bollywood lessons that have helped me in negotiation. Some of you may have seen the movie. If not, please do watch it. First thing I learned is, being a Shah Rukh fan, is this: sometimes you got to lose, right? I see some smiles. I'm sure some people love Shah Rukh. So, हार कर जीतने वाले को बाजीगर कहते हैं. So sometimes you got to lose to win in the long run. Remember that. This is, when I saw the movie when I was young, didn't make sense, but now it makes a lot of sense. Even when I'm negotiating with an employee, if he or she really wants, high raise, if he or she is good, honestly, I will not cut a corner. I would buy the loyalty, buy the goodwill, because loyalty, goodwill, commitment, trust me, there is no price to that. Same way, some of the clients who have stayed with us for last 7-8 years, that's because, even though the contract says something, they also know when they want the work done to be in the weekend or they need something extra, I'll go the extra mile. And they also know that if I need a help from them, or if my sales quota is not happening or I need extra projects, they'll help me. So focus on relationship, the intangibles, right? Focus on the intangibles. Like I said, negotiating money, in long run, you'll realize, like I was sharing with Anvesha and Sarista and Karan, that one of my first bosses told me that never negotiate salary. It sounds very counterintuitive, but I've actually followed that. And I'll tell you why. That's the second Bollywood advice. If you watched Three Idiots, where they talk about that, success follows. Try and focus on your ability, your brand, become the apple, become special, focus on the relationship. Because if your personal brand becomes the apple or the Shiv Vada Pav, people will want you. Create demand. That the company must want you. The best job hunters don't have a resume. People get headhunted. So become someone in your early years, focus on building capability, personal brand, knowledge, so that you have to never negotiate. You think when Ratan Tata, has to go for a, let's say he's retired from Tata and he's being hired for, let's say, Mahindra. You think Anand Mahindra will have the gall or audacity to negotiate salary? Cannot, right? And again, you don't have to be a Ratan Tata for that. That's a lifetime. anyone, some of the best salespeople. It's you have to focus, always control the variables in your control. Salary negotiation, right? Moment someone knows that you negotiate on price, you know what also happens? They might give you, but they also get a signal that boss, I can buy this person with money. And you know what? Many companies for whom money is not a concern, they'll buy you for money. And you don't want to be in that position. I know as young people that extra 10,000, 50,000, it makes a huge difference today. But play the long game. If you're playing the long game, focus on your credibility, your capability, your capacity, your knowledge, your perceived brand. Because if you do that, literally what Rancho says is true. Success will beget success, money will follow. I'm sure you guys may be tired in a COVID year to hear about this because you have rent to pay, bills to pay, loans to give back. But I wouldn't lie to you that if you play the long game, give yourself the first 5-10 years. There's a reason why Albert Einstein said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Just like money in the bank compounds, relationships, client relationships, your marriages, it gets better with time. Same with your personal brand. Put in first 5-10 years, it may sound stupid. I can tell you this, ever since I got that advice, I have never negotiated. Whatever is given, it's given. But I would ask a question that, hey, if I take the job at whatever you're giving me, tell me a path to get to the money that I want. Money is important, huh? Let no one tell you that money is not important. Money is damn important. Life runs on money. Money gives you options. So if any of you here feel guilty asking for money, take that guilt off. Money is critical, right? You need to desire. There is no qualms in wanting a apple or wanting a yacht or wanting 5 condos. Nothing's wrong. Ambition is great, but let that not define you, right? Chase the ambition, chase the money, ask the company, give me a path. So when I joined Pinstorm, I asked Mahesh Murthy, who was the CEO then, that look, I'm taking this at a slight pay cut, give me a path. He said, no worries, here's a deal, I'm going to cut with you, here's a base you take, but for every deal that you bring to the table, you're going to get this. Here's some intangible learning opportunities. I'm going to give you speaking opportunities. Those intangibles, most people fail to negotiate because everyone's very myopic. Paisa, contract chahiye, party karenge. Don't do that. Don't shortchange yourself. Take that, I'll end with this note. When we were graduating from NUS, one of my friends he got an awesome job from Barclays Bank. He got, in Singapore dollars, 15 years ago, $4,500 a month. Again, the absolute number doesn't matter. Just to put it in context, that was 2x of the average salary that all of us got. My first salary was 2,525. And we were just flabbergasted, man, like this guy must have negotiated, he must have fought hard. But the other thing, so one thing is focus on negotiating intangibles, learning opportunities, growth path, speaking opportunities, training, people management, etc. The other thing is also about chasing money is this. 6 months later, I asked my friend, dude, how is it going? You must be killing it, dude, like, 2x salary. He said, no, you know what? I'm only happy on one day of the month. And you can guess which day, right? It's the 29th or 31st of the month. And that's a sad life. Trust me. That's a very, very sad life. You know why? Because the money feels great. Of course, you can buy, spend, party, travel, blah, blah, blah. But 28 out of 31 days, you're struggling. You're not happy with the job you're doing. I can't tell you that if I don't, like the reason I love my job, what I'm doing today at Happy Market is because honestly, I love this. Today is a weekend evening. The reason I'm doing this is because I love doing it. I'm not getting paid. Yes, I'm getting some attention. I'm probably getting a little bit of credibility, but it has to come from within, right? That's one. In life, we do things, remember, for typically what I call the 3 Fs: fame, fun, fortune. All 3 are important, but decide what's more important for you. And trust me, fortune will come. Focus on the fun. If the fun is good, if the heart is there, fortune will come, fame will come. Second thing is, once you get, money is a drug, right? Ultimately, what is money? Ultimately, money is a constant. Because as you all know, right? If I get a 1 lakh salary, my life chal jata hai. If I get 10 lakhs, I will still end up spending that money. I don't know if you guys have, it's like homework. If you give me 1 day to do a homework, I'll get it done. If you give me 10 days, I'll take 10 days to get the homework done. Life is funny. Same way with money. I know whatever money I've earned in my life, same. Till I got married and my wife put some sense and we started investing. It was like whatever came in went out. That's when I realized, what am I negotiating for? All this extra money is for an ego boost, because income, outflow, right? What's the point? But once you get used to a higher salary, I have found very few people who can adjust downwards. That's the problem with the drug called money. But and so again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't ask for more money. Ask for money, negotiate hard. But if you get to a point where it's a bit of a stalemate, but if the job or the client opportunity or the relationship gives you happiness, peace of mind, learning opportunity, fun, any day I'll take it, any day. Because life is long, at the same time life is short. So I got to make the most of every day. Yeah. So as I end, all I'm going to tell you is focus on variables in your control, focus on your learning, focus on your skill sets. Remember the Algebra of Happiness. It's actually a book by Scott Galloway. Find a book called Algebra of Happiness, which talks about the compounding effect. The first 5 to 10 years of your career, I can't tell you, I've been through this myself. It felt like hell. Living at half the salary of my friends meant like hell, because I didn't choose the MNC life. I said, no, I'm going to do what I think gives me satisfaction, which was startups, small companies. But the small companies gave me a chance to learn. They gave me a chance to hone my speaking skills, gave me a chance to network. In a big Microsoft, I'm not saying that's wrong. Remember, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, it's got to be true to you. If you like a big company, corporate structure, perfect, go for it. Nothing wrong. But if your game is to be at the forefront, be out there selling, be networking, be speaking, be cracking deals, failing in the process, then you got to choose a different path. So choose a path that's good for you. Ultimately, remember fame, fun, fortune, but focus on building the asset called you. If you don't do that, you will never build leverage in the long run and play the long run game. And I'm going to end with 2 book recommendations. One is called Never Split the Difference. It's by Chris Voss. You can, if you're not into reading books, just find a YouTube video. He used to be his lessons of negotiating basically came from negotiating with terrorists. So trust me, pretty hard-earned lessons there, where one wrong step could mean someone's life, right? It's not a salary. And the other one is getting to yes. The authors are the people who came up with the concept called BATNA, right? So 2 books I would genuinely urge you to kind of read or find videos about. But also remember, it doesn't have to be a bad conflict if you think of it as win-win, as problem solving. If you take it in the right spirit, also if you use it in the right area, right? So figure out where to use it, where not to use it. But it's a tool like other things. And I'll conclude by saying that the first quote is from Kennedy: let us never negotiate out of fear. Always negotiate on the front foot, right? If you're negotiating from the right part of your heart or your mind, negotiate not out of fear. That's not a position you want to be. That's not a BATNA you want to have. But let us never fear to negotiate, because the second quote from someone else, that everything is negotiable. Whether or not it's easy is a different thing. So remember to know what your BATNA is. Negotiate front foot. Play on the front foot. Negotiate out of strength. Otherwise, what you do is you set a precedent and you're negotiating out of fear. The other side gets it and you're not in the best position. Yeah. So that's where I end. I know I've taken extra time. Sorry about that. Hopefully it was useful. What I would say is happy to take some questions now, or I would urge all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. You can send me messages on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to respond. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Prantik sir. You can probably stop sharing screen. Thank you, sir. It was a really, really amazing session. Unfortunately, we have run a little longer than we expected. But nonetheless, it was very intriguing and we were all extremely active, as you can see from the chat box. Unfortunately, our next session is in like the next half an hour.
Yeah.
So what we will do is we will collate the questions and we will reach out to you separately, or the participants have all the tools for themselves on social media to reach out to Prantik sir anytime, and he's been super, super kind to us. So feel free to reach out and ask your questions. We will also be collating and sending it to him. But thank you so much, sir. We will conclude the session for today. Vismaya, over to you.
With that, we come to the end of our workshop on the art of negotiation. Thank you, sir, for this truly enlightening session and for being with us today. I think I speak for all of us when I say that the learnings from this session will last us a lifetime. I'd also like to extend my sincere gratitude to the IT team who have made Virtual Comvisage 2020 a reality. Finally, thank you to all of you for being a wonderful audience. I request you all to please switch on your cameras so we can take a group picture. Is it done?
Yeah, we're done.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everyone. If you have any questions you'd like to ask our panel members for the panel discussion on the 10th of October, please fill the form shared with you before 9 p.m. tonight. We hope to see you all again at 6 p.m. for the next session on the culture of reimagining boundaries. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Prantik sir. Thank you so
Right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
sir.
good one.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank
Bye,
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, guys. We are very, very sorry we were not able to take questions. We will surely reach out to you guys, collate it, and reach out to sir. Thank you.
Anvesha? Sorry.
Yes.
Should we?
Yes, I will end this meeting over here. Just give me a moment. Yes.
Yes,
You
we
can
can.
see it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Magic. Amazing, isn't that? It's all working just fine, I think.
Yes.
Perfect. So tell me, will there be an introduction, or how will we do this?
So what we do is we start the session with our student anchor, and in this case, Mudrika. Mudrika, if you can just, yeah. So
Okay.
Mudrika will begin by introducing the topic and introducing you. And from there, the floor is all yours. You can begin presenting.
Great.
We generally ask the participants to keep dropping questions in the chat box. We can address it all at the end of the session. And we finish the session with a vote of thanks by Shaista, whom you have met.
I didn't hear that part. You'll finish the session doing what?
With a vote of thanks by Shaista. You met her in the last meeting that we had.
Yes. Hi, Shaista. How are
Hi,
you?
sir.
Yes.
Hello, sir. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good, good. And is this the last session for you? Because it's evening for you, or are you going all night, or how is this?
No. This is the last session for the day, but we have 2 more days to go for Comvisage 2020.
Yes.
And just like to introduce you quickly to our faculty mentor, Dr. Nilesh Gokhale, sir. He would
Hello.
just like to say hi.
Good to meet
Hello,
you.
Bud, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, good. Yeah, good evening to you.
Yeah, right. I mean, thank you so much for having agreed to speak during Comvisage.
My
And,
pleasure.
Yeah, it would be a wonderful opportunity for our students as well.
No, it'll be great. I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, as my team must have already briefed you about the audience. The audience is all MBA students, but unlike a very classical or traditional MBA, these are students of communication management. So they specialize into the courses which are related to advertising, brand communication,
yes,
public relations, analytics, and so forth. So that's the domain we operate in.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, no, that's excellent. So looking forward to it. And what is it that you teach in particular?
I look after brand communication specialization. And as far as courses are concerned, I teach strategic brand management.
Great.
And also integrated marketing communication planning.
Yes. And I don't know, do you know the organization called IAA, International Advertising Association? They're a global, group. Yeah, great. So I have a strategic partnership with them. So I do a lot of things. In fact, I'm speaking at their big upcoming conference in October on brand.
27th and 28th.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there you
in
go.
fact, I attended the last one that happened in India at Kochi.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, there you go. So we have similar interests, and
very true.
That's great.
Absolutely.
In fact, if you don't mind me saying, I literally stalked the IAA India chapter, and I reached out to you through there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, since you were already speaking on that forum in, a topic which is your forte, and I think our topic is also on the similar lines today. I
Yes.
was not very sure if you would agree to speak to us before them, but it all worked out really well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I don't see that as a conflict. So yeah, no worries.
Just have a few more minutes to go.
Sure.
So in fact, Robert told me that you were interested in networking with the other speakers on the event lineup.
Interesting. Yeah, I think he mentioned that because, I find that usually at conferences, speakers are in a sense isolated from each other, especially now, and online that's more so, but even in live events, they don't really interact. And whenever we do interact, it's a whole new level of value, right? And makes it that much more fun, that much more special. And I'm sure you have a good mix, a good lineup of speakers. And so I think what Robert was talking about is to share our experience with you and to say to you that what you can do is not only get really good speakers, but have ways for them to interact. And in that sense, you're creating a community of experts that are tied to you because you're the one that's the catalyst for that conversation. And you could take that in different directions. You can have, regular sessions for them, say every 3-4 months, to get back together and talk on particular topics. So it's just a really, I think, smart and fun thing to do. Yeah.
So since we have like 4 time zones converging for this event, just working on the logistics part to sort that out, because that will be the first time I would be probably organizing it on a virtual platform. So I told Robert accordingly.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the things that you can do is simply just introduce people via email and just say, you're all part of this conference. Give a brief, like 1 or 2 sentences in that email about each person, and just say, this is just for you to get to know each other. And it may be just as simple as that. But yeah, it's kind of I think it's a good idea. So.
Awesome. So we are here. We are at 6 o'clock, and I think we should begin without any further delay.
Perfect.
Nilesh, sir?
Anvisha, Ruchi ma'am might just join in.
Okay. Shall we wait for a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she won't be putting her video on, but she would just say hi to Geba, and then we move.
Sure.
All right.
Mr. Bird, that Dr. Ruchi Jaggi, who is our director, will just join in, say hello to you, and then we can then start the session.
Wonderful. Good. And so you're excellent. Yeah. Let's just wait then for a moment.
Yeah.
Anwisha, did you mention that I have a special tie to India?
I think my entire team knows it by now. You have been super been pumped up all over the batch. So yeah.
Oh, yes. So I have these wonderful vintage pictures of my grandfather with President Prasad, of India, and various other really just great photos of his time as ambassador. And he always, when I was a child, talked to me about India because he was also ambassador to Belgium and to the UN on behalf of Hungary, where I was born. But India was always by far his favorite place. So that's what he always talked about and showed me photos of. So yeah.
We are hoping that once this pandemic is over, you will actually take a trip down here one day.
Exactly. Well, that's my goal. As I said, I've always put it off just because I wanted to make it very special, and yeah, it has to happen. It has to happen.
Sure. Yeah, so Mr. Bhatt, Dr. Ruchi Jaggi, who is our director, she's online.
Great.
Hi, Mr. Bhatt. Welcome to SIMC. I'm sorry, I'm facing some massive connectivity issues since afternoon. So I'm keeping my video off, but it's a pleasure to see you and welcome you to SIMC.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you.
Yeah. Looking forward to your session. Thank you for taking out this time. Yeah.
Of course. Sure. Thank you.
Madhrika, let's begin. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communication, Pune, it is my pleasure to welcome you all back to one of the most anticipated sessions for the day called The Culture of Reimagining Boundaries. To take us through the journey of rethinking creativity, strategy, and market boundaries with innovation, we have amongst us Mr. Gabor George Burt from across the ocean, or should I say, the blue ocean. Mr. Burt is a pioneer and expert of business transformation and blue ocean strategy. From the outset of his career as the founder of Econ International, he has been an innovator in the field of financial analysis to innovating for business leadership. Later on, he went on to become the director of Blue Ocean Strategy, where he has helped diverse set of organizations worldwide to carve out an uncontested market space for themselves. He has even contributed case study material to the worldwide best-selling book of the same name, Blue Ocean Strategy. Taking his expertise further, Mr. Bird founded a business transformation firm called Slingshot. Slingshot's framework is at the forefront of global innovation, and it enables individuals and organizations to overstep perceived limitations to achieve high growth. And to top it all, Mr. Bird has been serving for 4 years as the advisory board member of the Global Innovation Institute. And his achievements speak even louder as he is a renowned speaker who has previously presented at various high-profile conferences such as World Marketing Forum, Forum One, and Forum for Partnership. He has also been featured in influential business publications including Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Entrepreneur magazine. We are extremely delighted to have you here with us, sir. Thank you for joining us. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Wow, what an introduction. That was great. Very much looking forward to our time together. I know that for you it's late evening. For me, it's early morning. I am in the U.S., so I always, I find it such a wonderful thing to be talking to people in the future, right? So you're almost a full day ahead of me. So let me jump right in and share my screen with you, and get going, because we have, I think, a really exciting topic, a really important topic. And it's all about this idea of the culture of reimagining boundaries. Now, I know that you are MBA students. I know that you focus especially on the art and science of communication, and that this whole conference is about cross-cultural communication. So this topic that I am looking to share with you is of course very much related to that, and it's also one that is absolutely critical right now when we're facing the crisis that we are in currently, in terms of how do we engage an organization, the culture of an organization, to be able to deal with it, to be able to turn crisis into opportunity, to really quickly transform and be one of the future shapers. And of course, this is from the perspective of just business and leadership. So your quest as MBA students, as well as from the perspective of communication, how do you actually activate this sort of thinking inside an organization, and then with all the stakeholders outside, is absolutely essential right now. So I think you'll enjoy this topic, and you'll be stimulated. To get us going, I use this image from NASA, an old retro poster, Infinity and Beyond, right? So I thought that was a really good reminder, because when President Kennedy in 1961 made the announcement that before the end of the decade, in the 1960s, we will land a man on the moon, everybody thought that he was crazy. The US did not have the technology. to do this. There was no precedent. They've only sent one person to space before then. So it seemed completely impossible. But when faced with an impossible task or situation, the human spirit, the human sense of collaboration and creativity kicks into high gear, and magic happens. So I thought that was a great way for us to get into this topic. So another thing I wanted to share with you, just as a point of interest, is that about 100 years ago, this strange contraption was invented. It was called the isolator in 1925. And as you can see, the whole point of it was to allow a person to focus on just a single task that they were working on, to block out the entire outside world. And it strikes me that right now we're faced with the opposite problem, that artificial, sudden isolation is thrust upon all of us. And the challenge is, how do we stay active, relevant, and engaged? So I would like to take a quick poll with you right now and ask your opinion. So you have three choices. One is, do you think the current crisis is temporary and things will go back to normal? Number two, do you think the current crisis is creating a whole new world full of dangers, or a whole new world full of opportunities? If you had to choose one of those three, which one do you think is most aligned with your view of what is happening right now? So let's take a quick poll. All right, I see a pretty clear pattern, which pleases me, because most of you, as you should, see this as a period full of opportunities, right? And that this is in fact going to create a whole new world. So let's just review. Over 71% of you agree with that statement. 17%. So some of you think that things would go back to normal, and the least picked answer was the one that new normal will be full of dangers. So let's use this as a way of inspiring us to really think, how do we get into this mindset of the third answer, that this is all creating a new normal full of all kinds of opportunities. So I love this quote by Paul Romer, who is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, who said, "A crisis is a terrible thing to waste." How interesting, right? Because our initial reaction is a crisis is full of dangers, full of threats and difficulties. And all that is true, but there is another side. And that other side is that a crisis represents a reset. It's a period of refresh. It is a period of fresh new beginnings, and every organization has the opportunity to be one that shapes the future, that imagines what will be next. And that is why he would say something like that. Now, we can look at inspiration from the past, from all kinds of businesses that have thrived during crisis, or new products that were launched. So I'll quickly share a couple of my favorites with you. One is FedEx. So FedEx was started in the 1970s, and just a few months after its launch, the oil crisis hit, and the price of oil went up 40%, which was the major principal resource of this company. Now, this didn't kill FedEx, but made them that much more efficient, that much more pragmatic in managing their costs and building a resilience to high oil prices. The company Nintendo, as well as Nokia, are centuries-old companies, or go back to the 19th century, and have always continuously reimagined, reinvented themselves. They've done all kinds of different businesses. And Nokia, in fact, in the early 1990s, almost overnight, had its biggest market disappear. The Soviet Union dissolved as an economic entity, and that's where Nokia was doing most of its business. Yet within 3 years, the company reimagined itself and started a whole new industry called mobile telecommunications. Nutella is one of my favorite examples. It is a chocolate treat, still today one of the favorites around the world. In fact, many people eat it for breakfast. And it was started after World War II in Europe, where there was a shortage of chocolate, which was an expensive product. And the manufacturer of Nutella, Ferrero, an Italian company, substituted hazelnut, and which was much cheaper and more abundant. And the combination of the two is magic. And finally, Groupon and Airbnb were both started in the wake of the last major crisis in 2008 in response to people having very little disposable income. So Groupon gave people a way to enjoy promotions and price discounts, to again go back and experience local service providers. And Airbnb gave people a way to monetize access capacity in their apartments as a way to generate further income. So I think when we talk about this idea of a culture of reimagining boundaries, there are 6 steps involved. And I will take you through these 6. Let me just first show them to you. The first is really this idea to view the current crisis as a form of extreme disruption. And that's really important because we know this word disruption. This has been around for at least 20 years. And by viewing the current crisis as just an extreme form of that, it brings it within the normal, within the manageable, rather than something that we cannot handle. The second is therefore the way we want to have our culture is to have this perpetual crisis mindset. In other words, understanding that standing still is not an option. So we want to be continuously on the move. How we do that, how we create a culture of continuous movement and reimagining boundaries, is to engage this wonderful resource, which is our creativity. But creativity in itself is abstract, so we need a systematic way of applying it. And that's where the slingshot framework takes center stage, because it gives a structure for applying creativity. Now, once we have all that, then what we can do is use our approach to applying creativity and to creating this culture to precisely do what we need to do in a crisis, which is do things that minimize our need for resources or the use of resources, so in ways that we can cut costs, and make sure that we keep all our team, everyone that works with us, engaged and motivated. And if we do that, then during a time of crisis, we can not only maintain our current levels, but actually prosper. We can grow, we can reach new customers, we can actually engage a whole wider community. So let me take you through this quite quickly, but one at a time. So viewing the current crisis as a form of extreme disruption. So if you are communications majors, I am assuming that you're probably familiar with this acronym, VUCA, which stands for this perfect storm of really seemingly threatening and dangerous factors that are part of our environment. So V is for volatility, U is for uncertainty, C is for complexity, and A is for adversity. And that's the world that we live in, full of disruption. So what do we do? How do we actually manage? How do we lead an organization in such an unpredictable world? So in order to answer this, I like to share with you a short story, an anecdote I like to tell about 3 tourists and a lion in Africa. And the story is that there are 3 tourists walking along in Africa on a safari. And as they're walking along, suddenly a ferocious lion jumps out from behind the bushes in front of them. And it's showing its fangs, it's roaring, it's ready to pounce, looking at the 3 tourists. So in reaction, the first tourist is completely frozen, terrified by fear and unable to move. The second tourist, as soon as he processes this existential danger that just is confronting him, starts to take off any excess equipment. So throws away his tool belt, his water bottle, his binoculars, his cell phone, his backpack, his sweater. The third tourist, in the meantime, is still calmly just assessing the situation with her hands in her pocket. After a few more seconds, the first tourist, still unable to move, just barely looks at the second tourist from the corner of his eyes and says, "You are crazy. No matter how much of your things you get rid of, you are not going to be able to outrun this lion," right? And the second tourist turns to him and says, "You are right. It's not the lion I have to outrun. It's at least one of the two of you." And the third tourist, after a couple more seconds, takes out a lighter from her pocket, lights it, and the flame scares away the lion. Okay? So I think these three tourists are symbolic of how companies react to crisis like this. The first tourist, of course, is the worse off because he's completely caught off guard and has no response. And that's true with many companies. They just do not know how to react. They do not have the right culture to do that. The second tourist is somewhat better, but he's only focused on short-term survival. And the danger with that is that he's getting rid of resources that might be important, in fact, necessary in order to prosper, in order to turn crisis into opportunity. Therefore, the best approach is represented by the third tourist, who, when faced with a crisis, engages her creativity, kicks it into high gear, and comes up with a solution that puts her in control. So with this in mind, with this sort of approach, let's now talk about the second step, which is now adopting this mindset of perpetual crisis. So if we look around today, we see within this VUCA world, not only companies that are in trouble, that are not able to react properly like the first tourist, but in fact, many companies like the third tourist who are doing things and are so successful that they've reached levels unprecedented in the history of business. And here are some of these new champions, these new titans of business. Among those are, for example, are companies that have reached a valuation of $1 trillion, okay? And when we look at them together on a single page, we see a couple of really insightful commonalities. One, just how young these companies are, right? So Uber and Airbnb are barely 10 years old. Number two, that they can come from anywhere in the world. So there are American companies on this list, but there's also ones from China, from Australia, from the former communist country in the Baltics. But the most important commonality is that all of these new champions disrupted a market space without the infrastructure that was thought necessary to be in that space. So Uber does not own a fleet of cars. Airbnb does not have a portfolio of hotels, and Netflix does not own an entire group of movie theaters. And this is really exciting because what it means is it's not your resources that count. It's your ability to understand changing lifestyles, changing work styles, and how to leverage existing external resources such as technology to get into market spaces. In fact, if you have a lot of resources, that may be a disadvantage because you have to continuously upkeep and finance them. So this is one of the things that in a crisis is a really empowering observation, because this is when we do not have access to sufficient resources or the usual resources. So we need to understand that that's not what really matters. What matters is our ability to understand which way lifestyles, work styles are moving, and understand how to use existing resources that are available to us inside and outside of our companies. So one company that gets this really well is Samsung, which is one of the world's leading consumer electronics companies. And they were also started during a crisis in the 1930s during Japanese occupation as a dry fish shop. So just as a simple food store. And now they are one of the top companies in South Korea and one of the leading consumer electronics in the world. Within consumer electronics, they first started just making simple transistor radios, and then they got into other electronics, but they defined their business as life care, which is a really interesting concept well beyond electronics. And their CEO says that we manage by perpetual crisis. We know that we need to change everything but our families in this world of continuous disruption, and that everything we do today will be gone in 10 years. And this mindset allows the company to get into all kinds of new businesses well outside of what they're doing today. So they're getting into solar panels, medical devices, biotech, drugs, because they understand that they are in a environment that no longer has boundaries. And if that's the case, then they can get into all kinds of new businesses if they are the first ones there. So now we understand that we want to view the current crisis as a form of extreme disruption. We want to therefore have a culture, an entire organizational approach based on the idea of continuous movement and perpetual crisis. How do we do this? And this is where the role of this wonderful resource that is available to everybody, that is absolutely free and incredibly powerful comes in, and that's creativity. So here's my second poll question to you. And as students, you can answer this either for yourselves. So think about creativity in your studies, or think about the workplace. So think about whether you think creativity is important for work. Do you consider yourself to be creative? And do you think that workplace in general or university studies in general encourage creativity or not? So let's do the first one. Creativity is important for my work. Very overwhelming response. Looks like pretty much everybody agrees with that. Excellent. So let's end this first poll. Let's move on to the second one. I consider myself to be creative. Curious what you think about yourself, whether you think that's true or not. Excellent. So again, most everybody thinks of themselves as being creative. That's really, really encouraging. So let's end this poll as well and move on to the third one. My workplace encourages creativity. So you can think about workplace, or you can think about universities in general. Do you think universities encourage creative thinking? All right. So again, looks like a very dominant response, positive response, that most everyone, at least it looks like 3/4, 75% think that universities or workplaces in general encourage creativity. Very interesting. Let's end the poll and show you this study, which was a survey of 100,000 people working in different industries around the world. So overwhelmingly, as almost everybody thinks that creativity is important for work. Less than half of people surveyed think of themselves as creative. And look at this, only 2% think that their workplace actually encourages creativity. So there's a huge disconnect between what we perceive as a critical component to our work, creativity, and what is actually encouraged and nurtured by companies. I love this quote by Albert Einstein, who said the following: imagination is everything. It is the preview to life's coming attractions. A beautiful statement. But again, let's reflect on how we view the current crisis. Most of you said that this crisis will create a whole new world full of opportunities. Well, then what this means is that this is our chance, therefore, to use our imagination, as Einstein said, to imagine life's coming attractions. Imagine what the world will be like in the wake of the COVID crisis, and let's get our company to be the first in that space. And that's where the opportunity lies. Now, Thomas Edison, who was one of the greatest inventors of history, was once asked, Mr. Edison, what do you think is the greatest invention of all time? And he had an immediate answer to this. So he didn't have to think about it, or he actually thought about it before. What do you think he said? Well, his response was, the greatest invention is the mind of a child. What an interesting response, right? So he didn't respond by specifying a certain product, a certain thing that was invented, but he went to the source of it all. And he said the source of everything that has been invented and where it all starts is in the mind that children possess, right? And why would he say that? So again, I like to give you a quick anecdote, and this is from my personal life when I was a child. This was told to me by my parents that apparently I was around 2 years old, and I was playing with small cars on a coffee table, and out of the corner of my eye, a fly landed on the table and caught my attention. And perhaps it was the first time that I was so close to such an insect, and I tried to reach out to touch it, and it disappeared. And my reaction was to look under the table where it fell, but I didn't see it there. So this happened 3 or 4 times. Same thing. The fly landed near me. I tried to reach out to touch it. It disappeared. I looked under the table, didn't see it. But the 4th time this happened and the fly disappeared, I didn't look down. I looked around and I saw it on the wall next to me. Now, if you think about this short, brief snapshot, on one hand, what a common occurrence this was. This happened to all of us, all of you, as you were children. This is how we learned the world. This is how we got to understand how things function, right? But from another perspective, what a profound moment it was, because my entire understanding of the world was changed. I had an entire paradigm shift in the way that I processed my environment. And what Thomas Edison was referencing, therefore, is this ability that we had as children to be not just curious, but to have an open mind and to always explore and be flexible in our thinking to new ideas and new concepts. And I think that's what he was talking about, which is also why Peter Mernholz, who is one of the leading customer experience experts today, says something that resonates completely with Edison's observation, that everything you need to know about innovation you learned in kindergarten, right? It's that sort of thinking that we need to engage. Now, how do we do that? How do we engage creative thinking so that it's not abstract, so it's not just brainstorming, but the systematic application of creative thinking? And this is where the concept of Slingshot that I created comes in. It's precisely geared to address this issue. So as was mentioned in my very gracious introduction, my background is with Blue Ocean Strategy. So I was one of the core original experts. And for over 10 years, I was a blue oceanographer that went around the world helping organizations understand and apply this concept. And the whole image of blue ocean is all about creating your own market space that you have all to yourself. So it's a beautiful image, and it's a wonderful strategic goal for any organization. But in reality, this is what I found, that while most companies would love to be in the blue ocean, very few were able to make the transition from the shark-infested, very competitive red oceans. They were stuck in between the two. Why do you think this is? Why could they not make this move? Well, it was because of this, that most organizations are not equipped to understand how to transform themselves, how to get into new space. And if they find a new space, even if they even identify a new blue ocean, they have the thinking that they need to abandon where they are today. So they see a trade-off. Do we get into a completely untested new market space that may be very high potential and lucrative for us? Or do we stay in the space that we know and we're comfortable in, even though there's not much growth and it's really competitive? And when you see it like this, you tend to be more conservative and you pull back. And so I launched Slingshot as a way to address this and to say that you do not need to see the world in terms of this trade-off, that you can actually systematically use creativity in your organization and to both grow your current business as well as get into new market spaces. So Slingshot, even the symbol, is all about thinking and reminding us of our childhood, because Slingshot is a universal symbol of childhood playing and creativity. And even the mechanics of a slingshot is such that you pull back against the elastic that launches forward a projectile, the same way that you would pull back against these self-imposed mental boundaries. And when you do that, it launches you forward continuously into new spaces of high potential and limitless possibilities. At the very core of Slingshot is a very simple question. What do people want? What does a person want most in life? Okay, because ultimately, at the end of every business relationship, are people, are final end consumers. And we need to understand what matters to them in order to be relevant, in order to have a relationship with them, right? And if you're focused on communication, this is key for you. How do you establish an ongoing rapport and relationship and be able to maintain that? So the answer that I love to this question was given by a former Army psychologist who said, the human equation is to multiply joy and divide pain. And then he went on to say, pain shared is pain divided, joy shared is joy multiplied. I think this is a beautiful statement, but it's also a critical one for any business, because I challenge any organization that I work with. And that's true in business, it's true in government when I work with various governments, as well as in academia when I work with universities. I challenge them to think of themselves as being in the business of multiplying joy and dividing pain for their stakeholders. And that is their customers, that is their internal customers, so that everybody that works for them, as well as their communities. And if you can activate and deliver on this statement, then you will be relevant. And in fact, you will be indispensable to all these stakeholders. Okay? So with that said, the three key Slingshot components to actually deliver on this are the following. And again, I like the idea of simplicity and simplification. So it's just these three concepts. And if an organization gets good at activating these three concepts, they will be the future shapers. They will continuously create blue ocean market spaces. The first and most important is learning to identify customer pain points and to continuously turn them into points of delight and joy. The second is continuously stretching the definition of what you do. In other words, always think about what value do I provide for my customers and how do I expand on that. And number three, embrace what I call the innovation shortcut. Instead of inventing something, just look for new combinations of already existing resources. So here are a couple of examples during this crisis, turning pain points into points of delight. Groupon is a great example. So again, in the wake of the last crisis, Groupon provided a way to take a key pain point, so things that were bothering people at the time, which is that they didn't have enough money to enjoy local service providers, such as restaurants, movie theaters, fitness centers. It gave them a way to do that by offering daily, a whole daily menu of deals and promotions leveraging technology to do this online and virtually, so that they could again start enjoying local venues. So it transformed a pain point formed by the last crisis into a point of delight, as people were really thrilled and looking forward to receiving their Groupon deals every single day. During the current crisis, Walmart did something very much along these lines, which is to convert the parking lots in their supermarkets into outdoor movie theaters, right? So people are again stuck at home. They have no place to go, and they have little forms of entertainment. So understanding this, Walmart again transformed the pain point into a point of delight and looked at its own resources and said, how can I activate something that will allow people to enjoy themselves? Now, in terms of the idea of expanding the value of what we provide, the second point, a good example is British American Tobacco, which is one of the leading manufacturers of cigarettes in the world. But did you know that BAT is also at the front lines of developing a vaccine for COVID-19? Why? Because it turns out that tobacco has special qualities that would allow the vaccine to be administered or to be produced cheaply and purely and at room temperature. So if this company only thought of itself as being in the business of manufacturing cigarettes, it would never come up with this idea. But when you expand the definition of what you do, in this case, using tobacco for human consumption, then you see the possibilities open up. And in this case, it even would help the company to go from being in the business of doing something that is actually harmful to human health to actually something that is very much promoting well-being and positive human health. An example of the third point is about the innovation shortcut, combining things in new ways, is this hotel from Amsterdam, Netherlands, which of course understands that people are just not coming to hotels right now. No one is traveling, but there is a need, a new demand by local businesses for an environment that is fun, that is absolutely safe, so sanitary and well equipped. So they are reconfiguring their hotel rooms into workspaces like this, combining the best of their traditional hotel rooms with well equipped offices and even gyms, as you can see in this picture, that are fun to work in. So those are quick examples of these key concepts. So transitioning now to the second to last point is, how do we now activate these concepts in the current crisis so that we identify opportunities and do it in a way that minimizes our need for resources and keeps all of our staff engaged? So an interesting question to ask, building on the previous point, is how good do you think companies are in removing customer pain points? After all, this is exactly what key leaders of our times are telling us. Steve Jobs said, you've got to start with the consumer experience and work backwards. It's not about technology, it's about that experience. Bill Gates is telling us your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. Yet, look at this statistic. In a single year in the US, which is arguably the most customer-centric market in the world, angry customers cost the economy almost $6 trillion, which is over 1/3 of the entire output of the economy. And it affected over half of all consumers. Now, what is causing this friction, the frustration and pain? It's things that everybody has experienced. It's having to contact companies multiple times, waiting too long, inconsistent experiences, being promised one thing and delivering another, right? So what this is telling us that overall companies are actually awful, terrible at understanding the customer journey, the customer experience, and the key points of frustration and pain that they are feeling. What this is also telling us that if we have a company that gets this, that can actually activate this, then we will again be set apart. We will be able to create blue oceans. So therefore, what we want to understand is that our mission as an organization is to turn pain points into points of delight and joy. And during this crisis, you can see all kinds of opportunities for this because all kinds of pain points are being created. So one example of this is what's now called online work gyms. So one of the key effects of the current crisis, people are working at home. Yet that's a difficult environment to work in. So people are finding it difficult to be motivated, to stay engaged, to be creative. So work gyms are these online courses that have started during the current crisis that are a combination of personal coaching, of webinars, and fitness classes in actual gyms. And what they do is they teach people how to better structure and how to work with accountability, how to spark creativity, and to be productive at home. So this is exactly activating the concept that I'm talking about. And finally, number 6 is how do we, once we understand and start to really harness the power of this sort of mindset and cultural shift, how do we actually use a crisis to reach new levels of success? So again, one big advantage we have is that everyone that works with us understands that standing still is not an option. So everybody is much more open to this idea of creative thinking and contributing to your creative ideation as an organization, and you can take advantage of that. So one example of how powerful this is the story of T-Mobile USA and its former CEO, John Laguerre, who just stepped down. So he was the CEO for the last 8 years, and he took over the company when it was left for dead. So nobody thought that he had any chance, because right before his assumption of the leadership position, a deal fell through with AT&T, and they were stuck as the number 4 provider. The other 3 ahead of them were much better quality, much better market standing. So nobody thought that they would have a chance. But John didn't look at it this way. He looked at this crisis as an opportunity, as a personal challenge. And he launched what he called the Uncarrier campaign. And just by that simple title, he signaled that we're going to do something completely different and unlike everybody else. And as you can see, even the way he looks, he has long hair, he dresses in pink and black leather, and he speaks very frankly and in a very humorous way. It was all about challenging the status quo. And what his Uncarrier campaign did is very quickly move the company up to 3rd position. And in fact, now they have just acquired the 3rd biggest company, Sprint, so they can now go head to head with the top 2 players. And his entire campaign was based on identifying key customer pain points and turning them into point of delight. So for example, before his campaign, mobile phone companies had very complicated contracts. So he offered very simple contracts. Before the Uncarrier campaign, there were all kinds of fees for additional uses and charges. And he introduced the unlimited plan. Before the Uncarrier campaign, you had to pay a penalty or a fee if you switched phones before a certain period of time was up. And what he did is said, you can switch anytime. So this is the power of understanding the customer experience, the key pain points they're feeling, and then doing something about it. And by the way, when you do this right in terms of communication, it resonates with the public, with your customers, which is why he personally has an online fan base of over 6.5 million people. So during the crisis, this is the perfect time for every single organization to step up and communicate, to communicate a positive message of caring, of support for everybody else. And we see many examples. So the Texas Roadhouse CEO announced that he's foregoing his own personal salary to help workers. in the company. LVMH, the big French luxury company, has converted its factory to produce large quantities of hand sanitizers for free. So they're doing their part to help. Or Apple CEO Tim Cook announced that it is making a substantial contribution to first responders in Italy. So as you can see, the view that is continuously expanding from our company to our community to our entire country or to the world as a community. And this is the opportunity that we have to really make connections with communities that otherwise we would not have access to outside of a crisis like this. So here's my final poll to you as communication majors. So let's assume for a moment that you are part of the senior executive team at Corona Beer, and you're in charge of communication. So you're the communication director for Corona Beer. Would you see the current crisis because of the name association as a major threat or problem, as a significant opportunity, or having no significant impact on the company? Which one do you see? Very interesting, and again, very encouraging, because most all of you see this as a significant opportunity. So let me end the poll, and again, almost 95% of you think that way, and you're absolutely right, because that is the way that I think as well. But unfortunately, this is not how Corona Beer saw the current crisis. So when Corona hit, there were many rumors in the news, such as this survey that you see, that people were going to stop drinking Corona. There was even rumors that the beer contained the virus itself, all negative publicity. So what did Corona Beer do? Absolutely nothing. They stay silent, even though they have an online fan base of 15 million people. They did nothing. But why? When this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for them to step up and do the right thing, for them to be at the very forefront of the correct corporate response to the crisis. For example, announced that they would contribute 5% of all beer sales to help victims or first responders. They would have not only made that back immediately, because alcoholic consumption is up 40% during the crisis, but they would have created incredible value in terms of global goodwill to their brand, people remembering that Corona did the right thing. But sadly, they did not take advantage. Now, contrast that, and by the way, they could have used their very clever imaging and communication, visual communication, for example, to represent proper social distancing with an image like this, with the lime in between the two bottles. Now, contrast that with the way that this company and the CEO of this company responded. Movement Mortgage was also started in the wake of the last crisis in 2008, is the fastest growing mortgage company in the US. And their whole name, obviously, Movement, is about change, disruption, being the leader and shaping the customer experience in ways that were really frustrating before. Now, this is the CEO of this company, and look at how he's communicating in the wake of the crisis and how this is the right way to do it, in contrast to Corona's silence.
Hey, Movement team, you know, we've been talking a lot about adapting and overcoming in the face of adversity. Well, this market is creating a lot of adversity for a lot of people. And I tell you what, the obstacles that we're facing in the industry right now are going to separate the players from the pretenders. The players, they're the ones that are going to get up, adapt, and overcome. The pretenders, they're going to decide the cost is too high, the work is too much, or they don't have the means or the capability to adapt and overcome the obstacles our industry is throwing at us right now. Movement team, I want you to know you have a lead team that is committed to adapting and overcoming. We love adversity. We love adversity because adversity is an opportunity for us to separate ourselves from the competition. So wake up, know you are part of a winning team. We are waking up, adapting and overcoming to all the changing market conditions right now. I expect you to do the same. From our houses, get up, do our part for America by adapting and overcoming in this new volatile environment so that we can continue to serve American homeowners with excellence and help improve their financial positions in the midst of a tumultuous time. I love you. Keep at it. Keep leading with love.
So hopefully you agree with me that this is the right kind of leadership and corporate response to the crisis. It's full of energy, it's full of empathy, it's full of passion, and it's full of this whole idea of looking at crisis as opportunity, embracing the challenge. I also love the fact that, he's obviously at home, he is exercising with his family in the background, so he's putting it all on the line. And by the way, he is a former American professional football player, so he brings that energy and leader to the way that he engages his stakeholders. So wrap up and then open things up for a Q&A session. So these are the 6 key points that I shared with you that I think allow any organization to shape a culture of reimagining boundaries and therefore to turn the current crisis into opportunity. Started with this idea of just viewing the crisis as a form of extreme disruption, all the way through the 6 steps to understanding that a crisis is an opportunity in disguise, and we can actually grow our market footprint, our business, and our community during this time. So I like to end with a wonderful quote by Steve Denning, who writes or wrote for Forbes magazine. And in one of his articles, he talks about this idea that a firm doesn't find new ways to delight a customer, it creates them. Notice the word delight. He doesn't say satisfy, it's delight. It's that deeper emotional connection. And it's not about a passive process, it's active. It's creating those opportunities. And a crisis gives us the perfect moment to do that, because everything can be and has to be reimagined. In strategic thinking, there's no such thing as a mature industry. There's only an industry to which imagination has yet to be applied. And that's the key theme that I've shared with you, that it's all about our ability to engage creative thinking to any business, any situation. And when we do this from the perspective of the customer, which is the key, then opportunities are boundless, they're limitless. And a time like this, when everything is to be reimagined, this is the perfect opportunity to really understand how we want to be part of that, how we want to shape the future of our space, how we want to contribute to our company being able to do that. So let me stop there and turn it over to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session. It was literally has opened a mind to limitless opportunities, I would say. Thank you for that. So the floor is open for questions now, and I would call out the names and you can ask your questions by unmuting yourselves. So can I please request Janam to ask his question first?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
So my question is that, sir, after a certain point, is creativity dependent on appreciation? So are they correlated in any way?
Say the question again. It's clear that what?
Creativity is dependent on appreciation.
What do you mean by appreciation?
If someone appreciates your creativity in certain way, then you will be,
yes,
you would want to do it more.
No, absolutely, that's a good point. So, and this is why it has to be a whole cultural phenomena within an organization. So remember our survey that I shared with you of the 100,000 people, where only 2% said that their workplace actually encourages creativity, right? That's exactly the point that you're making. If your workplace, if your boss, your management and leadership team doesn't encourage and appreciate creative thinking, then you're not going to do it, right? So that's the whole point, is that this is a cultural phenomena. So when I work with organizations, it's from the top down. So the top have to understand the importance and the power of this. And again, what is positive about a crisis is that this is now not an option. So there is no company that can say, we can keep doing what we've been doing, right? Every single organization now understands that they need to rethink, reimagine their business, which by definition means that they have to creatively look at what they do. And if they have not been equipped or set up until this point to do that, to encourage the creative contribution of everybody that works for them, then this is the time to do it. Otherwise, their future is very much at stake. Okay, so that is absolutely, you're right that this is only correlated in terms of creative application with the idea of a cultural shift that starts from the top and creating an organization that encourages, appreciates, motivates, and rewards creative thinking.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Janam. May I please request Anirudh to unmute and ask his question?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, please.
So when it comes to innovating during crisis, we find that companies with larger capital backing can do it and can afford to do it. But whereas if you're a startup and you're really struggling to come up, like resources are on a real shortage. So what would, how would smaller companies handle a crisis in that case?
Right. And, I would almost challenge that. I think that it's much harder for larger companies to innovate in many ways because they are complacent, right? They are large, they can't move as quickly. And this is where I think entrepreneurs and startups actually have an advantage. So I work with companies in terms of the whole range, from startups to the top multinationals. And I can give you one, for example, that comes immediately to mind. I worked with a startup company called Landslide, which wanted to get into the space of Salesforce automation, in which there were other giants. So you had Oracle, you had SaaS, you had Microsoft and Salesforce.com, which were billions and billions of dollars in terms of company revenues and size. So what could this startup do? Well, we used the logic that I shared with you. We identified that all these giants were converging on competing just on the tech platform, how good their technology was. And they forgot about the customer experience, meaning how well did the actual people, the salespeople who were using the platform, how well did they interact with the technology? And when we looked at that, we found that they hated it because they looked at these systems only as monitoring systems by their bosses, by their management. And so we introduced features that turned that pain point into point of delight. So we actually built a database of the best sales experts in the world, which they could access through the website so they could learn how to be better salespeople. Secondly, we put in a VIP function, which was a phone number that they could call after a sales meeting and talk to a live person and basically share or dictate their notes. And that empowered them to feel like they had a personal assistant. So it was that human touch that we introduced. And the result of that was that Landslide was the only company in this market space with all these giants that within 2 years was recognized as the visionary for this market space by the Gartner Group. So that's an example just to kind of contrast to what you said. And again, I think that as entrepreneurs, as startups, you have so much more flexibility, so much more power to see a market space and say, what are they all missing, right? And then build a business that addresses that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anirudh. I'd now like to request Anvesha to ask a question, please.
Hi, Mr. Bhatt. So while listening to your presentation, a thought just crossed my mind regarding the myopia that a lot of companies have. So I was wondering what you would say about BlackBerry. When BlackBerry had launched itself, I remember I bought my first BlackBerry with my first salary ever. And that BBM Messenger used to be a whole new craze, and everybody had a BlackBerry in their hands. But slowly WhatsApp overtook them and completely positioned themselves as indispensable in their stead. And BlackBerry slowly got phased out. How do you think BlackBerry could have handled this better?
Right. Hands up of anybody that has a BlackBerry still.
Still have the old one, don't use it yet.
Do you? Do you? Okay, maybe as a museum piece, right? As an antique. So this is one of the most fascinating industries, and one that I work in a lot and talk about a lot is mobile telecommunications. Because in the period of 30 years, this market space started by Nokia went from market introduction to market acceptance to market saturation, because by 2013, there were more phones than people in the world, to market transformation. So it's really, if you look at that industry, whatever business you are in, it shows what will happen to your business, right? In an accelerated way. And I had the fortune, for example, of meeting last year in San Diego, Marty Cooper, who actually was the inventor of mobile phones, right? He did this in the 1970s with Motorola, which again didn't realize what it was sitting on, but it was fascinating to talk to someone who created something that basically changed the world, right? But to answer your question, with the BlackBerry and Research in Motion, who made BlackBerry, they had over a 40% market share until 2009 in the US. So they were a dominant player. Within 3 years, they were down to less than 2%. That's how fast that industry moved. And the reason for that, when you, I have the result of a survey in 2009 when they were still at 40%. And the survey was that when your subscription is up, would you be open to switching away from BlackBerry? And over 50% of the responders said yes. So the writing was on the wall. The question is why? And the answer to that is because BlackBerry was a very functional device, but it was not a fun device, right? And remember what I said, one of the key things is to always continuously expand the definition of your business and the value you provide. So by 2009, the iPhone was introduced in 2007, and that made mobile phones fun, right? It was no longer just about functionality. It was also about personal expression and having fun and communicating with your friends. And BlackBerry didn't understand that fast enough. So when the utility of the phones, mobile phones, expanded to be personal companions, not just business objects, that's when it was a very quick shift away from BlackBerry, because they just could not keep up and they did not provide that sense of value. So that's what they missed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anvesha. Pomali, would you please like to go next?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Good evening. It was such an insightful session.
Thank you.
And love to hear from you. A lot of insight. So, sir, my question is that I think that professionalism brings a lot of structure in the organization, and it brings in a linear way of thinking too. So, which may hinder creativity in some sense. So, what's your take on that?
Right. Absolutely. It's a balance, right? So an organization by definition is about structure, and structure means that you need to have rules. But we also at the same time need to nurture creativity, and that's not a trade-off. You just need to manage both. So one of the things that this crisis again is making clear is that you don't need to have a structure by everybody being physically in one location, right? So now it's telling and showing us that how much more flexibility you can have in an organization with people working effectively from home. Now you no longer are limited to people in your vicinity that you want to hire. You can now go after and bring the best talent from around the world to your organization. Then you have companies, some of these new giants, whether it's Google or Virgin or Nintendo or others, that are showing that you need to build creativity into your structure. So you create workspaces that allow for that. You create motivational systems. So for example, I think at Google, you have 10% of your time is flexible for you to explore new projects, new opportunities, and you're expected to do that. So when you talk about structure, that now becomes part of that structure, right? So you need to accommodate it and not just think about structure as rules and regulations and following orders, but also as one that allows for people's self-expression and creative contribution.
Definitely. So I have one other question to ask that in this changing times, marketing has shifted drastically. Like people are pitching up, like they're becoming more flexible in their brand communication. And the problem is that the more you try to change, it's like the more you remain the same. So it's like flexibility is important, but some way I think that communication is getting lost. It's like too much, like we are actually bringing AR and VR into customer experiences and all, but some way there is a glitch which is still remaining. So how do you think that like bringing it's a counter question to the first question, but uh, how do you think that
Yeah.
the communication can be made more effective even if it's flexible?
Well, that is about, being in the communication field like you are. The idea that you're going to do something that is attention grabbing, that is different, is only part of the equation. You need to understand how to make that count, right? What resonates with your target audience. And so if you incorporate the key concepts that I shared with you, that what you want to really target is what is the key points of frustration, disconnect, and pain that your customers are actually feeling in the experience of that product or service that you are communicating. And in fact, what are the key pain points of the communication process itself? Then you have a wonderful and important point of departure. How do you turn those pain points into points of delight, right? How do you do things in ways that haven't been done before by taking advantage of the innovation shortcut that I mentioned? So within communication, one example is that right now, most of communication is visual. So one study shows that over 85% of communication is visual, and therefore people are overstimulated visually. So if you're going to communicate to them visually, it may not have much impact. So this is why some of the leading brands are looking at other senses, such as the sense of smell, which is the most tied to our sense of memory. How do you communicate a brand essence across the all five senses, right? Now, obviously, if it's just online, that's more challenging, but still doable, because I think one of the best ways of communication is blended, right? So it's something that immerses your target audience in a way that they engage with your brand in multiple touch points. So I worked with one of the leading, which is now one of the leading rums in the world, out of Nicaragua, called Flor de Caña. When I started working with them, they were just known regionally as a very high quality rum, but they did not have a global name or presence. And the way we got them globally recognized, the communication and the strategic platform we built, is to show them as the first rum that you can experience across all five senses. So it's not just about the sense of taste, but a sense of smell, sound, touch, every single sense. And so that's one example. And one of the things that I would encourage you to always think about is how can you communicate across all five senses and multiple touch points in a way that addresses customer pain points and turns them into points of delight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was such a great answer. Thank you.
I would like to please request everyone to keep ask only one question. Thank you. And may I please now request Aishwarya to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mudrika. Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, sure. So what I am trying to understand is, the scope of creativity is determined by commercial targets. I mean, you are a good writer only if your writing sells. How do you think we can collectively approach this problem? I mean, externally, I understand it's a function of demand. But internally, say, a senior manager not being as scrutinizing of the work you present to them, or how do you think we could possibly overcome it ever, if we can?
Well, let me turn this around and first ask you, what do you think is the answer to this, having heard me speak as well as your thoughts on this topic? What do you think is the right way of approaching this?
So I personally feel that, since we have more often than not followed a very traditional outlook in terms of, how creative you can actually get. I think now that we have better reception for, actually creative stuff amongst the audience.
Oh, please, I think we're just interrupted, but please continue.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying, I think, because we're sort of moving past the traditional way of looking at things and becoming more accepting of, the kind of stuff that's thrown our way, maybe that could be one solution. But again, externally, because I'm talking from my personal experience where I've seen my managers scrutinize every single word entirely based on what sells and what doesn't. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so true, but because there is a challenge in many organizations. So you have managers who've been there for a long time. They have a certain way of doing things, and that's how they want their team, everybody that works under them, to operate, right?
Yeah.
And that is a challenge. That is absolutely true. So one of the things that I do to overcome that resistance is, for any team that I work with, I ask them a 6-question test. And I say, these 6 questions will expose your self-imposed mental boundaries that is limiting your success personally as well as the growth of the company. And I challenge you that you will not get more than 2 out of the 6 questions correct, right? And that seems very beatable. So most everybody takes that challenge, and I win every time. And these are very basic questions, such as, what business are you in? What do you think should be the goal of innovation? Who do you think are your most important competitors, etc.? So that is my way of doing that, is to get people's mind to open up, to say, wow, this is something that doesn't need to be so confining, that there is much more opportunities that I am aware of. But if you have a boss that is not very creative and doesn't really accept you to contribute creatively, then what I would suggest is make small victories. So create like a small project or a small solution to something that actually shows him or her that what you did is you approached the question differently, that you asked the what if question and came up with a solution that was unexpected or is not a traditional way, and show the power. So that, to me, is what would convince someone that is above you to pay attention, to say that, wow, there is value in creative thinking. But encouragingly, the momentum is on our side because of a crisis like this. Everything that's happening is, again, all pointing to the fact that standing still is not an option. Keep doing what we're doing today is not an option. So hopefully that helps you.
Yeah.
And let me just say that I will need to wrap up in just a couple of minutes. I have my next presentation is to a leadership team in Puerto Rico, of all places. But maybe 1 or 2 quick questions more, and then let's wrap up.
Yes, I was just about to ask Mr. Bird, because I know there's another session coming up. We only have one last question that we'll be taking right now, if that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yes,
Madhurika?
absolutely. One more.
Yeah, Karthik, can you please ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, sir. Good morning.
Yes, hi. Good morning.
Sir, I just wanted to ask that, as per your wide and deep experience, have you witnessed any correlation between creativity and innovation with ethnicity of the place?
Did you say with innovation with?
The relation between innovation or creativity with ethnicity.
How do you define ethnicity, please?
So probably the culture of the place, or the region, or the origin. Does that also some way impact the magnitude of creativity or the kind of creativity a person or an organization probably will have?
Very good question. Very good question. And first of all, I think that diversity in general is huge in terms of sparking creativity. So when I work with my partner organizations, I always ask the most diverse team to participate. And when the leadership team comes together, I ask them to involve some up and coming, lower level, high talented individuals. And then I split them into teams that are as most diverse as possible. So people that usually don't work together get to think together and come up with solutions to the questions that I pose to them. But yeah, I think there are cultural differences. There always are. You know, I come from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, that has a deep tradition of creative thinking because this region has been through such traumatic times and such crises throughout history that it had to adapt to each one very creatively. But I do believe, so there are differences, absolutely, in terms of culture, in terms of the way creativity is applied around the world. My background beside business is psychology. So I've always been very attentive and curious about what truly motivates people to utilize their full creative potential. So my other answer to that is that at the very kind of foundation of that all, I do believe, as I mentioned to you, is that everybody is fundamentally creative, because as children, that is how we operated. That is how we learned the world. And that part of us stays with us. It just gets pushed down and repressed and a lot of times discouraged as we grow older and we join the workforce. So all we need to do is kind of unleash that, is to reconnect with that sense of creativity and combine that with this wealth of knowledge that we accumulate, and that combination is unbeatable. So yes, there are, I think, cultural differences, and we have to be sensitive and aware of that. But the good news is that fundamentally and underneath it all, we all have this creative ability and creative desire to contribute.
So as we come to the end of day 2, on behalf of the Institute, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Burt for being a part of Comvisage 2020. A subject like reimagining boundaries could not have been more relevant than times like this, where akin to a silver lining, so many new possibilities are springing up. This session itself is a testimony to that fact. And we are so grateful to you, sir, for putting it wonderfully into context. That being said, I remember our first call with sir where he expressed his intent to come visit India someday, and we hope we get to host you on our campus very soon. I now request everyone to please switch on their videos so we can take a group picture.
Got it. Thank you.
So on behalf of the school, I am very grateful for your session. I mean, I just wanted to say that while the picture was going on. So thank you so much. It was extremely, extremely insightful, very relevant, and the simplicity of the ideas is actually the most profound thing that came across. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, and I love the interplay, engaging with your community. I think the future is yours, and you have some wonderful minds and possibilities. And you're right. I would love the opportunity, hopefully in the near future, to come visit in person and continue this. So
absolutely look forward. Thank you once again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Great session, guys. Well done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. Chalo. See you tomorrow. Now relax. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Also, thank you to our alumni who have joined us today.
Oh, yeah. I think I got a hi from Saurabh and I see Richa. So it's great.
We're so grateful to have them today.
Hello.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Chalo.
I think Ashit, Saurabh and Bhumika had to drop off, but they were also a part of the session.
I think this
Hopefully
is
we'll be there again.
like you guys feel responsible about it, Richa. Huh? Comvisage, right? Now this is like the third and the fourth generation. What are they doing? Like that's how these guys look at it. But it's so great, so great. I just got a text from Saurabh in between. It was so nice. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Good night.
Bye.
Everyone, please fill up the Google sheet that we had, Google doc that we had shared regarding the questions for the panel discussion. We'll close the doc by 9 p.m. today.
While people are still exiting, Mudrika, Shaista, great job today. We had a wonderful day too, and let's all gear up for day 3 tomorrow. Have a good night, sleep well, and see you all bright and early tomorrow at 10:30.
Good night, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
people.
Bye.